Welcome to this HTML full course. During this course, you will learn whatever you need to know about HTML, meaning this is a complete course and by watching it, you won't need to take any other course on HTML. This is not a hook to drag you somewhere else to buy something like the rest of the tutorial, a commercial resource, or any other paid product. This is an all-in-one HTML full course that will teach you everything about HTML for free, and by watching it, you'll have a comprehensive knowledge about this markup language. During the course, I'll describe everything from scratch. You won't need to have any prior knowledge in programming or even computer usage. You will learn from zero and become an HTML hero just by following along and repeating the lessons and tasks that I provide. The first half of the tutorial is all about HTML and its features. Also, you will have some basic information about CSS and JavaScript, so at the end of the first half you will know about all HTML features and what CSS and JavaScript are and how we can use them in our HTML code. So at that stage you will be able to develop HTML web pages and websites, but we won't stop just there. In the second half of the tutorial, we will be using all of our knowledge that we gained during the course to build a fully responsive and multi-page website. The purpose of this project is giving you the idea of how you can use your HTML skills in real-life projects. Many programmers who know a programming language are not still able to use those skills to build a real project. But by completing a real project after the course, you will gain enough confidence and experience to develop new projects from scratch. Also, we will have more experiment with CSS and JavaScript during that project, so you will find out more about those too. The source code of the project plus a reference including HTML tags and so on are all packed and available to download for free. You can find the download link in the description of the video. Also, feel free to ask your questions in the comment section and I'll do my best to answer them ASAP. With all that being said, let's do HTML. First of all, let's talk about HTML itself for a few seconds. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. We have other type of markup languages, but HTML is the only one that is agreed upon by web browser developers and organizations as the default web page markup language. We mark different type of content using HTML so web browsers know how to deal with them and how to deliver those type of data to the users. In HTML, we use tags to differentiate between data types and format them. Let's keep it simple. Tags are just names or letters reserved by HTML and wrapped by brackets. When we use a tag, browser will know the type of the content that it's supposed to deliver and will respond to that format properly. And the whole course we will be using tags as HTML is just made of these tags and nothing more. So in the future lessons, we will work on different type of tags and we'll see how we can deliver different type of data, for example, text, images, videos, etc. using these tags. After this short description, now we are ready to create our first HTML page, so let's do it. As we know, all operating systems have their own default text editors. For example, on Linux, I have text editor. On Mac, there is a text edit application. On Windows, Notepad, and even mobiles and tablets have their own text editors. And this is the only application that we need to create an HTML page. So open a new document with your default text editor and type this line of code inside it. Open bracket, exclamation mark, doc type, and give it a HTML type, then close the bracket, and then Ctrl-Shift-S or Command-Shift-S to save the information. And I want to name it index, and the HTML must be the extension. So index.html will be the whole name of this file. After saving it, I will notice a web page icon on my file browser, and when I double click on it, the file will be open with a browser since this is introduced to the system as a web page and system will open it on a web browser. And this easy, we can create our first HTML page. As mentioned before, tags are reserved names and letters wrapped in brackets. Now it's time to see them in action. we have already created this line of code that it's actually an HTML tag. We have a reserved keyword, and to opening and closing brackets, and this simple line by itself is a standard HTML tag. We have two types of tags. One of them is single and one of them are double tags. The double tags must be closed after opening, but single tags like this are standalone by themselves. Let me give you an example about double tags. For example, HTML itself is a double tag and we need to close this tag after opening it. The way that we close this tag is repeating the tag and putting a / before the tag name. So this part will be the opening part and this part will be the closing part of this tag. And whatever we put inside it will be considered a content of this tag and will be marked up by the HTML tag. So we have two types of tags. Some of them are single type and some of them are double. And that's the whole concept behind tags. There is another concept behind tags and it's parent-child tags, and in this section we will be talking about them. As we saw, we have two types of tags. One of them is single type and one of them is double. In case of double tags, we need to put the content that we want to mark up with this tag inside this opening and closing part. Let's give an example about this, and that will be the head tag. That is a standard HTML tag and we usually use it inside the HTML. In this case, HTML will be the parent tag and head will be the child tag. Another example is the title tag. That is another HTML standard tag and we always use it inside the head tag. In this case, head will be the parent and title will be the child of the head tag. This way we can classify the child and parent tags in HTML. As you saw previously, we have a tag called head. Head is a standard HTML tag and we usually use it to put metadata about the document inside it. Whatever that we put here won't be seen on the screen, but they are there and will tell the system about this document. Let's see how it works. Here I have my head tag inside the HTML tag and I have a title tag that is empty. I have not set any data for it, and so when I save it and reload the page, I don't see any title for this page, and the only thing I'm seeing here as a title is the path of the file system of this document, and this is done by default when there's no title set. But if I set a title and save the page and reload it again, I will see the title that I typed here as a title of the page. So as you see, metadata are the type of data that are there and tell a system about the page, but they are not necessarily shown on the main part of the page, on the main part of the screen. So this is how metadata work. Another example of meta keys are meta tag itself. That is another standard tag that we use inside the head tag, and this meta takes attributes. For example, char set or char set or character set that sets the character to something. If I, for example, type UTF-8 and set the character set of this document to UTF-8, save it and reload the page, I won't see anything shown on the main part of the page, but we know that it's there and it tells the system that the character set of this document must be UTF-8, and this is how metadata work on the HTML pages. Beside the head tag, we have another tag called body that we use it to show the visible elements on the main part of the screen, and now we are about to work on it. Body is another tag that we usually use inside the HTML tag and beside the head tag, and is supposed to deliver the visible content. So let's create it and then close it because it's a double tag. And now whatever we put inside this body tag is supposed to be shown at the main part of the page. So let's create a title by the h1 tag. Don't worry about these tags, we will be talking about them in the future. And whatever I type here And if I save the file and reload the page, I'm supposed to getting it inside the main part of the page. And this is how body works and how it delivers the visual element of the page. Another concept about HTML tags is attributes. Attributes are the type of extra information that we can insert in tags to deliver some more information about that specific tag. Let's see how they work. In HTML, different tags can take different type of attributes. For example, in the HTML tag, we can add an attribute called lang that stands for language, and we can set the language code here. For example, if I type lang equals en, and it means that this content, this HTML document, is supposed to deliver the content in English language. So this is how attributes work. We previously created this char set and set it to UTF-8, and this is another example of attributes that we can use. As you see, we have the lang attribute in the HTML tag and char set for meta. We cannot use it vice versa. For example, lang cannot be used in meta or vice versa. So different type of tags have reserved attributes that we can use if needed. And this is how we can set attributes inside HTML tags. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment, and those are basically a type of softwares very similar to text editors, but with more features and tools that can leverage the experience of development and make it much easier and faster. In this part, we will be talking about one of the most common ones out there. Visual Studio Code, or VS Code for short, is one of the free and open source IDEs out there that is very powerful and nowadays is used by too many developers. And from now on, we will continue the rest of the tutorial inside this environment. But if you have any other preferred IDE, it's okay, you can use it. But we will be using this one, and we will install some extensions on it to leverage our coding experience. So the only thing you need to do to get it installed is going to code.visualstudio.com, download the binary related to your operating system, and install it on your machine. And while you're doing this, I'll go to the next scene and make it ready for you. Well, I already have VS Code installed on my machine, so I right-click on the file, open with, and then I choose VS Code to open this document with it. So from now on, I'll work on this document with my VS Code. Most of IDEs support extensions. Extensions are tools and plugins that can be added to IDEs to leverage the performance and customize it for us. In this part, we will learn how to search and install extensions in Visual Studio Code. While you have this IDE open, you can click on this icon that is related to extensions, and whatever you search using the search box will be loaded as the search query. So if I type live server, for example, all the live server extensions will be loaded here, and just by clicking this install button, I can get installed this extension on my IDE. I already have this specific item installed on my IDE, and I suggest you to use this because it can load any type of changes in real time and will save you some clicks every time that you make any change on your document. So search for live server and click on install button beside it and get it installed on your IDE. One of the useful features of most IDEs is the autocomplete feature, and that's when you type a part of a code and IDE completes the rest of it for you, and it will increase the speed of coding and also decreases the mistakes and typos that you make while coding, because autocomplete feature has a tendency to correct the mistakes as well. So let's see some examples about this feature. Previously, we wrote this code manually on our text editor. And the interesting thing is that Visual Studio Code can create all of this blank template for us just by typing one character. Let's remove this code and type just an exclamation mark, and then just by pressing Tab key on the keyboard, Visual Studio Code will create all of this blank template for us. And this is just one of the examples about autocomplete feature of this IDE. Another example is where we want to create a tag. I just type a tag name, for example H1, that we saw previously, and by pressing Tab key on the keyboard, VS Code creates the whole tag, including opening and closing part, and also it places the cursor right where I want to put some information inside this tag. Another example is where we want to create multiple tags at the same time. Let's say that we need to create 5 P tags. P is a standard HTML tag standing for paragraph, and when I type P star for multiply and then 5, and pressing Tab on the keyboard will create 5 P tags at the same time. These are just some few examples of the autocomplete feature of IDEs that can leverage our experience and speed up our coding. Now that we learned the basics of HTML and we have our environment set and ready to go, it's time to deal with the rest of the tags. And the first category is, of course, text formatting tags, because they are the most common tags and the simplest ones to start with. Let's talk about headings, that are one of the types of text formatting tags that we usually use to specify the titles and subtitles of our documents. Previously, you saw me using this H1 tag. H stands for heading, and 1 is the number that we use to specify the importance and also the size of the tag visually. H1 is the largest and most important heading tag that we have in HTML, but we have 5 more that are H2 to H6. So let's create some H2 tags. I put a star and type 5 here, and by pressing Tab I create 5 more tags, and now I want to edit them to say H3, H4, H5, and H6. The way that I do it is putting my cursor here, holding the Alt key on the keyboard down, and click on here, and this is the way that we can select multiple parts of the code and edit them at the same time. So I turn it to H3, then H4, H5, and H6. Now I use the same method to select multiple parts and put some content inside all the tags at the same time. And by saving this and reloading the page, I will have 6 heading tags. As you see, H1 is the largest in size, and also it's considered the most important title, and the rest of them are H2 to H6. Please note that we better use H1 just once, since it's considered the main title of the HTML page by search engines, and it's better to use it just once. But we don't have any limitation in using H2 to H6, and we can use them as many times as we need. The other tag that we use a lot while text formatting is P, standing for paragraph. And in this part, we create paragraphs using this tag for you to see. Just like before, I type the tag name, P in this case, and press Tab on the keyboard, and VS Code generates the P tag for me. Now whatever I type between these two will be considered a paragraph and will be displayed properly on the front end. Let's fill this with some placeholder text. We have a text that we use as dummy text called lorem ipsum. Previously, we had to search for it online or have it saved on the machine, but nowadays almost all of the IDEs can generate sort of this placeholder for us. The way that we generate it on VS Code is typing lorem and then a number that represents the number of words that we want to generate. For example, if I type lorem 5 and press Tab, VS Code generates 5 words of this dummy text for me. Or this is customizable. I type lorem 50, and this time VS Code generates 50 words of this dummy text, and by saving it and reloading the page, I will have a paragraph here. If I copy this and paste it underneath again and refresh the page, I will notice that the line at the end of this first paragraph is broken, and also a little white space is put between these two. And this is how paragraphs work in HTML. The tag BR stands for break, is for breaking the line and putting the rest of the content to the next line. Let's see how it works. Imagine I want to break the line from here, but I don't want to create a whole new paragraph. So I can use the BR tag here, just give it a little space and type BR and press tab on the keyboard, and this BR tag standing for break will be added to this first paragraph. And when I reload the page, I notice that the line is broken from here, from this word, but we have not passed to the second paragraph. And this is the way that we can break the line and go to the next page. And this is not dedicated to text. We can do it with other elements on HTML. The tag B, standing for bold, is one of the tags that we can use it to make the style of one word or more of a text bolder, and also emphasize a little bit on that part of the text. Let's see how it works. Back to our code. Let's say that we want these 3 words to be in bold size, and also search engine knows this as an important part of the text. So I just need to type B and press tab on the keyboard, and this B tag will be created for me. And since this is a double tag, we need to put the content inside it. So this way, if I refresh the page, I will find these 3 words in bold size. Also, we have another tag that does the same, and that's strong. If I type strong instead of bold, the result will be exactly the same. And this is how bold works. The other useful tag is HR, standing for horizontal rule, that we can draw lines in our HTML document using it. Let's see how we can do it. So far we have these 2 paragraphs, and let's say that we want to draw a line between these 2. We can simply do it by the HR tag. Just type the tag name and press tab, and this is a single tag. We don't need to close it, and just by saving and reloading the page, we will have a line between these 2 paragraphs, and this is how HR works. When we want to change the style of a text or a part of a paragraph to italic, we usually use the I tag. Let's change the style of these 3 words of the second paragraph to italic. So I type I and press tab, and now I cut this part and paste it between these 2, and by saving and reloading the page, I will have these 3 words in italic style. U, standing for underline, draws a line under the text that we use a tag for. I want to put emphasis on this part of the first paragraph that starts from here by drawing an underline underneath all of the text. So I use U tag and then cut this part and paste it inside, opening and closing U tag, and then refresh the page, and now I have a line underneath this part of the text. As we saw, U tag draws a line underneath the text, but del, standing for delete, draws a line over the text. Let's see how we can do it. Okay, let's put a line over this last word of the page. To do that, we create the delete tag by typing del and pressing tab on the keyboard, and then we can cut this word and paste it between the opening and closing part. And now we have a line over this last word. Pre stands for preview and is a tag that shows the exact format of the text, the way that we type it inside our code. Let's see how it works. First, let's create the tag by typing pre and pressing the tab key on the keyboard to generate the tag, and now generate some placeholder text by lorem 50 and pressing tab. Note that the whole content is generated as a single line. So if I save this and reload the page, I will have just one line of text and the rest will be over the page, and I can access it by scrolling horizontally. So this is how pre works. If I want to break the line, I can press and enter and create breaks here. And by saving this change and reloading the page, I will have all of those manual edits. Also, if I add some space and save, again, unlike the regular HTML formatting, I can see my manual edits here, and this is how pre works. Blockquote is another HTML tag that we use it when we want to quote from another source. First, let's create a p tag and put some content inside it. And now I want to add a quote here underneath, so I type blockquote. And inside it, I can mention the coded part of the text. And when I save it and reload the page, I see the coded part of the text in this style. And this is how blockquote works. Also, we can add the site attribute to mention the source this way. For example, Arashtad.com will be the source of this code, and this is how blockquote works. Now it's time for the fun part. Let's put some images in our HTML document now. As web designers and front-end developers, we're always in need for high quality and free assets to use. There are a lot of sources and websites out there that we can use, and Pixabay.com is one of them. This is not a sponsored video, of course, but Pixabay has been there for a while and can provide us with those type of assets. So navigate to Pixabay.com and pick a photo by clicking on it, and then you can choose the size of the image that you want to download and then hit the download button. I save this file as image.jpg, and also I save it in my project folder just next to my HTML document. And now I have the image just beside my index.html page and am ready to insert it inside my HTML document. The way that we insert images in HTML is by using the img tag. Img stands for image, and it's a single tag, meaning that we don't need to close it after opening it. So type img and press the tab key on the keyboard, and this will be generated for us with two default attributes. The first attribute is src, standing for source, and we need to give it the path to the image, and the next one is alt, standing for alternative text, and that's for when the image cannot be loaded for any reason. The image is corrupted, the address is incorrect, or any other reason. In those cases, the alternative text will be shown instead of the image itself. And it's a must in case of search engine optimization rules, and we better have it on all of our img tags. As you saw, I saved the image just next to my HTML page, so I don't need to give it any path, just the name of the image will be enough, and alt, of course, is optional. We can put whatever we want here. I just type image and save this. If you remember, at the beginning of using IDE, we installed the live server extension, and now I'm going to show you how you can use it and what it actually does. So far, we've been making changes on our code, saving it, and then reloading the page on the browser. But Live Server can automate this process for us and save us some time. The way that we can use Live Server is first opening the project folder with the IDE and then using it. The way that we can open a project is using this panel. Click on this first icon at the top left and then click Open Folder and open the project folder or project directory with your VS Code. And now the project folder is loaded on this left panel. And as you see, I have both files here, image.jpg and index.html. And now I can use the live server to load the page. The way I do it is right-clicking on the HTML code and choosing Open with Live Server. And this way, it will open in a browser. From now on, whatever changes that I make on this page will be taking effect in real time and will be displaying on the page. For example, if I create a title here, as soon as I save it, the page will be reloaded and my change will be visible. Live Server is a very handy extension and can leverage the speed and experience of our coding, so using it is highly advised. Links are one of the most common and important parts of HTML documents. You can rarely find an HTML document without an anchor link. So learning it is very important and using it is very common. In this section, we will be talking about links, how we can use them, and how we can customize them. Regardless how much links are important, using them is very easy. The only thing we need to do is typing A and pressing tab, and this is the whole link tag that we need to fill. The only attribute that is a must is href, that we need to put the address here, and then whatever we put here between this opening and closing part will be shown on the screen. So people click on it and will be redirected to the address that we put in the href attribute. Let's see how it works. First of all, let's create a text for it, for example, Arashtad, and save it. And now I have the link here, but by clicking it, nothing happens because we don't have any address on the href attribute. So let's give it the address of the best website of the world, arashtad.com. And by saving it, now we have actually an address, and by clicking it, we'll be redirected to Arashtad website. And this is how we can address links. The other attribute that we can use in our tags is target. And when we use target, for example, and set it to blank, now if this link is clicked, the new address will be opened in a new window. So I save it and now click on it, and as you see, a new window is created and the link is opened there. Also, we have another useful attribute, and it's title. And if I type something here inside this attribute, now if I hover over this link, the title will be shown to me, and this is another attribute. Also, we don't need to necessarily put text as the visible element of tag. We can use other elements like images, etc. For example, let's put the image tag that we previously used and save the document, and now I have a link instead of the text, and when I click on it, it acts just like the text and opens the address for me. And this is how we can use tags in our HTML pages. In HTML, we have different type of lists for different conditions, and in this section, we talk about lists and their use cases. One of the list tags that we use in HTML is OL, standing for ordered list. Let's see how it works. The way that we create lists is, first of all, creating the parent tag, in this case OL, standing for ordered list. And now we can add items with the li tag inside this parent tag. And this way, we can have list items inside an order list. I save it and I have the list item here, but since I'm using an order list, a number is attached to it by default by HTML. And if I add some more list items and save it, I will have the number for other list items that is incremented from 1 to higher. And this is how OL works. We don't need to just use text. We can have other elements like images, videos, etc. But basically, ordered list is a type of list that is incremented by numbers. The other type of list that we have is UL, standing for unordered list, and in this case the number is not attached to it anymore, just a bullet point for each item. The structure of UL is just like OL, but just instead of OL as a parent tag, we type UL, and this way we can have unordered list. As you see, the number is not here anymore and just a bullet point for each list item. The last one in this category is DL, standing for definition list. That is a little bit different with the previous two lists. Let's see how it works. In case of definition lists, the parent tag will be DL, standing for definition list, and we have two types of list items here. The first one is DT, standing for definition term. That is actually the title of some description, for example, title 1, and after that we can have a DD, standing for definition description or something, and here we can type some description about this title, for example, description about title 1, and here also we can have more terms and descriptions, for example, title 2 and description about title 2. And this is how it works. The title goes here, and with some indentation, the description of that title will be placed here. We can have more than one DD. For example, if I copy and paste it here, we will have two descriptions for this title 1, and this is how definition list works. Table is another HTML tag that, as the name suggests, helps us create tables on our document. It has a lot of options to customize, so we can create any type of tables regarding our needs. In this section, we talk about tables and how we can customize them. The basics of table is very easy. Just type table as the parent tag, and inside table we can have rows with TR for table row, and inside each row we can have multiple columns with TD or TH. TH is for heading of the table, for example, TH name, and also TH age. These will be the heading. And also we can have another TR for the actual record. This will be the name, and this will be the age. As you see, TH is showing in bold format, and the rest of the records will be in regular style. So if I add more records to it, it will be showing just like this. In the previous versions of HTML, we had an attribute for tables called border, and we would use it like this, and it would add a border around the columns. But nowadays it's deprecated, and even VS Code is showing it in red color. As you see, it's not recommended to do this way nowadays. Instead, we use CSS to style the tables. I add this little CSS code to the table. Don't worry about CSS, we will be talking about it in the course later on, but for now just have in mind that I've added a border with black color around the column, and the border will be the single line. I save it, and from now on we will be seeing the changes that we make on the border better. That's just the reason I added this style, but don't worry about it, we'll describe it later on. Also, we have another tag group that we can use to classify the information inside a table, and those are thead, tbody, and tfoot. And the way that we use them is just like this. Now we have a tag to insert the information of the header inside it. And also we have another part, this tbody, will contain the main content of the table, and we can use this tfoot for the footer. the content that we want to put in the footer of the table. And this is a way of classifying information. Also, the other benefit is when, for example, we want to make changes in appearance, we want to style just the header, we can access this t-head in our CSS and style only this part. If I want to change the style of t-body, we can access it using CSS and just style this one. But by default, as you see, after saving, we don't see any changes in appearance. And these are 3 other tags that we can have in our tables. Now let's talk about 2 useful attributes of tables. Let's say that we have 2 columns for a name. One of them is for first name, and one of them is for last name. Now I need to add those 2 columns to the rest of the table now. And now it's very regular and normal. First name John, last name Doe, age 33. Now let's say that we want to merge these 2 columns of the head, so it says just name, and underneath we will have both first name and last name in 2 columns. So the first row will contain just 1 column and the second row will have 2 columns. In this case, I need to remove it, right? And type it as just name. If I do that, the appearance of table will be corrupted. So to make it the way that I want, I use an attribute called colospan and I set it to 2. So now it will stretch as much as 2 columns underneath. So we have name, and underneath we have both first name and last name. And this is how colospan works. The other attribute is rowspan that acts just like colospan, but this one merges TD elements vertically. Let's remove this first name from the last row and save it. And as you see, the table is mixed up again. Now we want to stretch this first name to 2 rows. In this case, I add a rowspan 2 attribute to the first name, and as you see, now the TD is stretched to 2 rows. And this is how we work with colospan and rowspan. Sometimes we need to add comments to our code, so later on that we get back to our code, we will understand the purpose and meaning of that portion of the code. Also, other developers who see our code will understand it better. Adding comments is very common in programming languages, and each language has its own way of adding comments to it. Comments won't affect the code and won't be shown on the screen, but they are there and describe about that part of the code. In this section, we will add a comment to our code to see how it works. Here we have a simple page with some content, and let's say that we want to add a comment over here. The way that we do it in HTML is open bracket, exclamation mark, and hyphen hyphen, and to close it we need to add 2 more hyphens and a closing bracket. And now whatever we type between these 2 will be considered a comment. I type some text and save it, but we don't see any changes on the front end, and that's the purpose of comment. It's just there to describe about the code to developers, to the one who sees the code, not to the user. And this is the way that we add comments in HTML. We have 2 types of elements in HTML, block and inline. Block elements are those that wherever they are placed, they will cover the whole width of that section, but inline elements can be placed beside other inline elements at the same line. An example of block elements is H1 that covers the whole width of the section. The way that we can find it is just by copying and pasting it, and as you see, the first element has covered the whole width and has pushed the next element to the next line. An example of inline elements is image. When we create an image and copy it twice, we will see both images beside each other, and the first image has not pushed the next element to the next line. The thing that we need to have in mind in case of standard HTML coding is that we're not advised to put block elements inside inline elements, and that's not standard. We can put inline elements inside block elements. For more clarity on that, let's give you an example. For example, let's say that we have an I tag that makes the element italic, and we have some text here. For example, a dummy text here. I is an inline element, so when we have an I, we cannot put a P tag over here, since P is blocked. It may work, but it's not standard and it's not advised. But vice versa is okay, meaning that if we have a P tag, we can of course add an I tag inside it, because in this case P is block and I is inline. Iframe is a standard HTML element that creates a frame to load external web pages inside the current page. To create an iframe, we just need to create its tag. It's a double tag, meaning that we need to close it after opening it. We have an src attribute for the source, and here we need to give the address of the page that we want to load inside this iframe. I have an example.html page here with some placeholder text, and I want to load it inside this iframe. So I give it the address over here, and now by loading it, the content of that example.html is loaded inside the iframe. Also, we have another attribute that's frame border. We can set it to, for example, 0 to remove this border around the iframe. And also we have two more attributes. One of them is width, that takes pixels, and the other one is height. In this way, we can set the size of the iframe using these two sizing attributes. And basically, this is how we can load external pages using iframe. In HTML, we have two types of container tags. One of them is div for divider, and one of them is span. The difference between these two is that div is a block element and span is an inline element. These two are not dedicated to a specific type of data, and we can usually put any type of data that we want inside these two. And then by styling them using CSS, we can create the appearance of the page. Let's have an example for each of them. First, div, that is a double tag. We need to close it after opening and put some information, and then another tag. And by saving it, we see that each tag has taken the whole width of the window, and the second div is pushed to the next line. So if I create an span here, this will go to the third row, since the second div has pushed the span to the next line. But if I copy and paste the span multiple times, we will see all of the spans in the same row, and that's because span is an inline element. The other point about divs is that we can have as many divs as we need inside a page, and also as many elements as we need inside a single div. For example, if I put this in a paragraph tag and also create an image inside the same div and also a lot of more elements, it's possible, and we usually use divs as wrappers for other HTML elements. Favicon stands for favorite icon, and it's a small image displayed next to the page title in the browser. In this section, we will add a favicon to our web page. Here in my project directory, I have a small image called favicon.ico that is placed next to index.html. It's a small version of Arashtad logo, and it's only 16 and 16 pixels width and height. And now I want to add it to the page the way that it shows up just beside the title, and that's the reason we use the favicon. So we need to add a link tag that will have three attributes. The first one will be rel, that we want to set it to icon. The next attribute we want to use is type, in this case image /x icon since it's a .ico image, and the last one is a shref that we want to give it the path to the image, and since it's just next to the index.html, we don't have any folder, so just favicon.ico as the name, and by saving it, the favicon will show up just beside the title. If you didn't see it at the beginning, refresh the page multiple times because favicons are heavily cached by web browsers. So that's the way that we can add favicons to our web pages. In HTML, we have several elements that can define the output of computer code. Let's see how they work. In this document, I have a p tag to show you the default text formatting and size of the text on a web page, and here I have 4 more elements. One of them is kbd that mimics the keyboard output input. The other one is samp, standing for computer sample output. The other one is code, and the last one is var that we define variables in output with. Actually, these are not functional and don't do anything specific, but they are good for defining the type of the code that we insert in our pages. As you see, they are inline elements, so I've been adding a br break tag to separate the lines between 2 lines of the samp content. But in case that you want to preview and print the output and edit it manually on your HTML page, we can add a pre-tag before this code, just like this. The pre-tag was described before, and now if I type a second line here, the code will be looking like this. Whatever we put here, if I add indentation, you will see the exact changes that I make here on the screen, and we don't need to use, for example, BRP or other tags. And these are just for defining and mimicking the computer input and output. Addressing is a very important yet simple concept in HTML and any other coding language, and in this section we will be talking about it a little bit. I want to give you an example about addressing and paths using this image. As you see, image is just next to the index.html file, and index has direct access to it. So to use it and show it on the page, we just need to mention the image name in the src part. So the image will be loaded this way, as you see. But imagine that we had a directory called, for example, dir1, and we would have this image inside this directory. In that situation, index wouldn't have direct access to image, and just mentioning the image name wouldn't be enough, and the image wouldn't work. So to load an image this way, we need to mention the directory as well, and by saving it, the image will load again. And another example is another subdirectory called dir2, for example, and imagine that this image is inside this directory. In this situation, this is a project folder, and then this is a subdirectory, and this is the second subdirectory that image is located in. And as you see, the image is not loaded because the address is incomplete. To complete the address, we need to mention the second subdirectory as well, and the image will be loaded again. And this is the way that we'll link to images or other sources in subdirectories. Another situation is that when we want to link to an upper directory. So far we've been working on inner directories. Now imagine that index is here and image is here. In that case, we need to link to upper directories. For one upper directory, we add 2 periods and 1 /. For 2 upper directories, we add 2 more periods and another /. And this is the way that we can navigate to upper directories. In HTML, we have several groups, including sets of characters that can output entities, symbols, and emojis. Entities are reserved HTML characters that must be replaced with these sets. Otherwise, when we use those reserved characters as content, HTML will consider them a part of the code and will try to perform them as code instead of displaying them the way that we want. For example, if we want to display a bracket on the screen, we need to use a set of characters that can output the bracket. Otherwise, since bracket is a part of HTML syntax, it will be considered a part of the code instead of the content to show. We also have this for symbols like, for example, currency signs. We use a set of characters that can represent that specific symbol to make sure the output won't be something unexpected. The other group of these strings of characters are to display emojis. As we know, emojis have been around for so long, and we have a list of strings that can output different emojis in HTML documents. In this part of the course, we will have a look at this concept and some examples for each group of these character strings. Let's say I want to show some real HTML tags as content on the screen. In this case, I create an H1 tag and I save it, but I don't see anything because it's considered an HTML tag instead of content. If I put something here that is not a reserved HTML tag and save it, I can see it here. But if I type a code, for example, BR tag here, I still don't see anything because this one is considered a standard HTML tag as well, and HTML is trying to perform it. But if I type this and output this as the content next to the heading word, I can do something else. I need to replace these two, opening and closing bracket, with entities. The way that it works is that typing ampersand and then entity name, in this case for opening bracket I type LT, and at the end I need to put a semicolon. This way when I save it, I see an opening bracket as a content. Now I add BR and it won't be performed because we don't have any actual opening bracket anymore. And by saving it, now I have opening bracket and BR. And the way that I can add a closing bracket is again ampersand and entity name, in this case GT for closing bracket, and another semicolon. And by saving this, I have the complete BR tag here as output, but I have no code executed here because I have used entities instead of real brackets. Another example will be outputting a symbol. Let's say that we want to output euro, this sign. In some cases, maybe if just typing it, maybe the performance is interrupted, especially if we have not characters set to something suitable. In that case, we need to create the entity, type the entity code of the sign instead of using it directly. In that case, for example, if I copy it 3 times, I have 3 euros, and I want to show you how you can output this sign in 3 ways. The first one is using the entity name, and that's when we type ampersand and at the end the semicolon, and between these two we type the name of the entity, in this case euro, and this will output the same as the first line. The next one is using entity number instead of entity name. This is very similar to first one, but we need to put an hash here as well, and then type the code of this symbol that in this case is 8364. I save it and I have the euro as well. Now I want to use a hex instead of this name or this number. In that case, I need to type ampersand and again hash sign and also a semicolon, and here I need to put the hex code of that is lowercase x 20 AC in uppercase, and when I save it I have the euro this way as well. And this is how we can use entity names, entity numbers, and entity hex. The other example will be about emojis. Let's remove these and create an h1 tag, and here I want to type I, and then I type an entity number that will be ampersand hash in 128151, and then semicolon, and then I type HTML, and by saving it I will have this string here. I love HTML. Also, we can have other emojis, for example, ampersand hash and semicolon, that there will be there for all entity numbers, and 1, 2, let's give it 8, 5, and 1, 1. And by saving it, I have this icon. If I change this to another entity number, I will have another emoji. Another one, 3, will output this emoji. And this is the way that we can use entity numbers to output emojis, symbols, and also reserved codes. For more reference, I've put together an extended list of entity names and numbers for codes, symbols, and emojis that you can download for free. To find the download link, see the description of the video. Now let's talk about URLs a little bit. Web servers are sort of online computers that can serve web applications like websites, etc. Each device that is connected to the internet has a number assigned to it called IP address and can be accessed to via that IP address. IP stands for Internet Protocol, and it's basically a set of numbers that points to a specific online device. On the other hand, the URL stands for Uniform Resource Locator, and it's basically a string of letters and numbers that is pointed to a specific IP address. So when we call a URL on a link or via web browser, the URL will find the IP address that is pointed to via technology called networking, and it will serve us with that data that the server has available for public. This is the process behind web addressing and the way that we access different websites and web applications using our web browsers, applications, etc. In the web, multimedia is basically any type of file and format that can be seen or heard, like images, videos, audio, etc. Previously, we talked about images, and in this section, we will talk about some other multimedia types. Here inside my project directory, next to the index.html, I have two video files. One is MP4 and one is OGG. Both of the videos are the same, but the format is different. So I want to insert them inside the HTML document, and to do that, I need to use the video tag, and video tag is a double tag. I need to close it after opening, and inside the video tag I need to use another tag called source. This source tag takes some attributes. One of them is src, that takes the path to the video, in this case video.mp4, without any directory since it's just next to the HTML file, and the other one is type, that in this case I need to type video/mp4. And this is the way that I can introduce sources. The other one will be the same as the first one, but this time in OGG format and OGG type. Also, I can add a text here. For example, your browser doesn't support video files. And whenever the browser is not supportive, this text will be shown as the video instead. By saving this, I will have my video loaded. But we have more attributes to add to this video tag to customize it more. For example, if I type width and set a width for it in pixels, for example 3060, I can set the size of the video. Also, I can type controls, and by this, the control for this video will appear on the screen. Also, we have another attribute, for example, autoplay, And this way, by loading the page, the video will be played by itself. But autoplay, just play it once. If we want to autoplay it and also loop it, we need to add another attribute that is loop. This way, the video will be played non-stop. And these are the options that we have to set the video on our HTML page. To insert audio instead of video, we need to use the audio tag this way. And again, we will have a source tag inside this that we can take the attributes from the address, and this time the type will be audio / for example MPEG for MP3 and OGG for the OGG format. And we still can set a text to show if the audio is not loaded. No audio support, for example. And this way the audio will be loaded. But to see the audio object on the screen, we need to add the controls as well. So we can have the controls here. And by pressing this play button, the audio will be played. And this is the way that we insert videos and audio in our page. The reason we may need to introduce multiple sources is that maybe some browsers don't support a specific format of audio or video. So by introducing multiple sources, the browser will have the option to choose from that. In HTML, we have a concept called semantic elements. Semantic elements are the type of tags that have descriptive names and can give us a hint about the type of the content or section that they are wrapping around. Basically, semantic elements are the tags that have meaningful names. Here you see some examples of the most famous semantic elements in HTML. At the left side, you're having a visual example of a combination of the semantic elements that we can use to build a layout with, and at the right side, you have a list of the most famous semantic elements of HTML. Let's go through this list and have a quick look at some of them. Header is usually used for the top of the page where we want to put a showcase, a slideshow, the main menu, or things like that. Main is, of course, for the main part of the page where we want to put the most important part of the content. Footer, as the name suggests, is for the bottom of the page where we want to put some footer links, copyright notes, and content like that. And aside is for creating columns at the right or left side of the page as sidebars. Also, as you know, we can have nested elements inside other elements as child elements. For example, in the header that is a semantic tag, we can have another semantic tag like nav that usually used for navigation links and menus and things like that. Also, section can be an independent part of the page. Article can be a self-contained article inside the document. Figure can be a self-contained element inside a page, like, for example, diagram, photo, a piece of code, or things like that. Also, mark is for highlighting some part of the content. Time is representing date, time, and data like that. These are the semantic elements that can describe about the content or the area that they are used for, and they are very useful for web browsers, search engines, and web developers. At the end of the course, we will be using these semantic elements to build a layout and a full website with, so stay tuned to the end of the tutorial. SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization, and it helps websites to rank better in search results. In HTML, there are techniques and rules that help a website to have a better SEO. SEO is the most efficient and long-term affecting marketing strategy to grow an online business and its presence on the internet. In this part of the tutorial, we review some of these techniques to see what we can do to make our websites rank better in search engine results. One of the ideas is using the head tag to provide some metadata about the page to the systems and search engines that visit our page. The title tag that we used in the head tag is very important for search engines as it defines the name of the page and it can be used to provide its main subject. Also, as you saw at the beginning of this course, we can have a tag called meta in the head section of our HTML page. This meta can take different attributes to provide different sets of information about the page, and by doing this, search engines will have a more accurate idea about the content, and so our page will have a better chance to rank higher when a keyword related to our content is searched on the search engines. One of the attributes that can be used on the meta tag is the name attribute. As the value of this attribute, we can set, for example, keywords. When we set the name attribute to keywords, then we can add another attribute called content, and as the value of the content attribute, we can insert the keywords related to our page content and separate them by commas. Another value that we can set for the name attribute can be description. In that case, the content attribute can take a short description about the page content. This short description will be seen by search engines and also it will show up underneath the page link on the search results. Robots is the other value that we can set for the name attribute in the meta tag. The robots meta tag tells the search engine's crawlers how to index a page. And finally, a meta tag with viewport name helps control the layout on mobile browsers, and nowadays, as you know, mobiles are very common. Another technique for increasing the SEO of a web page is using a schema.org, that is also known as a structured data markup. A structured data is a standard format for providing information about a page and classifying the page content. Implementing structured data using a schema.org helps search engines understand your content better and can improve your SEO. Schema.org is a collaborative community with a mission to create, maintain, and promote schemas for structured data on the internet, and it provides a collection of shared vocabularies that webmasters can use to mark up their pages. There are various types of schema markup, such as articles, products, events, etc. You are seeing an example of a product schema on the screen right now. As some benefits of using structured data, we can mention, for example, enhancing search results with rich snippets, better visibility in search engines, and also potential increase in click-through rates as known as CTR. HTML is the first code that we touch when it comes to SEO, so it's very important to know about its techniques and reflect on them to develop an SEO-optimized template at the first place. So later on that SEO tasks take place, the SEO process will be much easier, faster, and more effective. Of course, SEO is a vast topic and its techniques are not limited to this few that I talked about, but since this is not a SEO course, we're not about to dive deeper in this subject. Of course, you can always learn more about it, and I encourage you to do so, and with each new thing that you learn about SEO, your design will be more and more optimized and valuable. Forms are one of the most important elements of interactive web pages. What we create as forms on HTML is the UI part of it, as known as user interface. But these forms can connect to other scripting languages like PHP and handle the backend tasks like sending emails, inserting data into database, and so on. In this part of the tutorial, we will create forms in HTML and review multiple scenarios that a form can be created for. In HTML, we create forms using the form tag, and also we can fill this tag with other elements like inputs, buttons, labels, etc. The form tag itself takes some attributes. Action is one of them. The action attribute takes the address to a scripting file that handles the backend tasks. For example, if I type a script.php here, the form after submission will connect to this file and handles the backend task that it's supposed to do. The other attribute is method, and it refers to the HTTP method that this form is supposed to work on. For example, post, get, etc. And the other attribute that we can set for our form is target. And for example, when we set the target to blank for this form after submission will open a new browser window and shows the result of that submission in a new window. And these are some attributes that we can set for the form tag itself. Now it's time to fill our form with some elements. What are you seeing on the screen are the most common form elements that we can use inside our form tag. First, let's start with input. What you see here are the different types of input elements. As you see, we have a large list of input types to use for collecting different type of information. In this tutorial, I use some of these input types, but I encourage you to have an experiment with each of them to see how they look and what they do. Now let's get back to our code and extend our form. To add an input field to a form, we use the input tag, and this input tag has an essential attribute called type that we need to set to something reserved. For example, in this case, the type is text, and it means the data type that we are expecting is regular text. When I save it, an input will appear on the screen. Let me zoom a little bit, and it can be filled with some user information. For example, this one, and now by sending it, this data as value will be sent to whatever we want. Now let's use another attribute that is name and set it to something optional, for example, fname for first name, and now I have access to this input using this name from outside of the input. For example, if I create a label that is another form field, and set the for attribute to fname, this label will be connected to this input, and whatever I type here will be shown on the screen. As you see, both of them are inline elements, so the label is shown just beside the input, and if I want to break the line, I need to use a br tag just like this, and this way I have a complete form field with a label attached to it. The other input that I need to create a minimal form is another input, but this time with type submit. The type will be submit, and by saving it, I will have a button here that I can submit the form with. As you see, it has a default text on it, submit query, but if I want to change it, I need to set another attribute called value, and whatever I type here will be shown as a button text. By saving it, now it's saying send. Now let's click the send button and see what happens. When I click on it, a new window opens, and that's because the target blank, and it calls script.php, and that's because we have set script.php as the action of the form. And this is how form behaves and responds to these two attributes. Also, the method it posts, it's not visible over here, but if it would be get, for example, a query string would be added to the URL and send this fname, this value that we sent to. Don't worry about those. Those are about networking and scripting languages, and this course is not about that, but just have in mind that these attributes have direct control over the behavior of the form. Now let's have a little experiment with other types of input. Let's create an input and give it a type email. Now, by saving it, we see that both of them looks like the same, but actually this is an email input and expects an @ as a value. If I type just email as a text and try to send it, it will return an error before submission. And by adding an @ and some other string, now it can be submitted. And this is a self-validation feature that inputs have. Other inputs can be, for example, input type color. In this case, a button with a color will be shown, and by clicking on it, the system will open a color picker from the operating system, and user will be able to pick a color from it. The other example is input type number, and this one takes only numbers. If I press these two buttons, you see that numbers are incremented or decremented. If I try to submit text, it will return an error because this is not an integer or a number. So this is another type of input, and another one will be, for example, checkbox. And in this case, I will have a checkbox over here that user can check or uncheck. Now that we learned about the basics of a form, let's create a Contact Us form and see what attributes we can set for inputs and other types of elements inside a form. I removed the previous form that we were experimenting with to avoid any confusion and start over from scratch. So first of all, we need to create the form tag that has an action that is connected to script.php, and we need to set the target to blank, so after submission it will open in a new blank window. The other attribute will be the method that we want to use the post method for this. So this will be the wrapper for our form. Now we need to create a label for a field called name. So we need it to say name, and I save it. Now I have the label. After that, I go to the next line, and now I create an input with type text, and its name will be name because previously we set the name for this for attribute here. Now I save it, and I have the field as well. Now let's go to the next line, create another label, and this one will be for the email field. And it will say email. I save it, and now I have the label. Now let's go to the next line and create another input with type email that has the name email, just like this. I save it, and now I have the email field as well. Now, next line, another label, and this one will be for the message. And it will say message. Now, let's go to the next line again, and this time we will create a text area. A text area is a text field that is bigger than input type text, and since it will take a message and it will be longer than a name or a short text that can be inserted in an input text, we need to create a text area instead. And this time I give it the message name to it, and that's it. Now we need to create a submit button for the form to be submitted. So I create input and give the submit type to it. And also I want the form to be sent somewhere, so I set the value sent for it. Now that I save it, I have a simple Contact Us form to work on. Now let's see what attributes we can set for this different type of elements and what they do. One of the attributes I want to talk to you about is required. At the time being, if I click the send button, the form will work and try to submit. But if I, for example, add a required attribute for this field and save it, now if I try to save this form blank, it will return an error, and that's because required demands some input before submission. Now if I add some information into it and click the send button again, the form will work again, and that's how required works. The other useful attribute is placeholder. Placeholder gives the user a hint about the expected value that they're supposed to insert into that field. If I add a placeholder and, for example, type here full name, by saving it, the text will appear inside the field. It doesn't count as a value, but it gives the user a hint about the type of the data that they're supposed to insert. Also, we have another attribute that we can set for our field, and that's where we want to disable a field. If I add disabled attribute to this, by saving it, the user won't be able to insert anything into this field. The read-only attribute does something very similar, and this way user can focus on the field, but they cannot actually insert anything inside it. We also have an autofocus attribute that we can set for a field. When we set some field as autofocus, on each page load, that specific field will be automatically focused. And this way, we can bring the attention on page load to a specific field. The other attribute that we can have for our field is size that is counted as characters and sets the width of the field. The default value is 20, so if I set it to 20 and save it, we won't see any changes. But if I set it, for example, to 30, the field will show up bigger. Max length is another attribute that sets the maximum allowed character for a field. If I, for example, set the max length to 5 and save it, just 5 characters will be allowed. And if I try to insert more value, it won't be taken. Also, there are some other field attributes that I've listed in the PDF reference of this course, and you can find its download link in the description of the video. Well, these were the main concepts that you needed to know about forms. You will be gaining more experience, of course, as far as you work with them and experience with forms along the way. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet, and it's the only language available to design the appearance of web pages created by HTML and XML. This language was born in 1994 by Håkon Vyum Lee and improved significantly when Bert Bose joined the project later on. Nowadays, CSS is the inevitable part of any web page you see on the internet and has no alternative for what it does. There are numerous frameworks and technologies built upon this language like SCSS, LESS, Bootstrap, Tailwind, and so on that can enhance and speed up the process of web design. But as said, all of these technologies are based on CSS itself. CSS has evolved through different versions. For the moment, the last released version is CSS 3, and although the version 4 is developed with so many powerful modules and new features, but it's not released yet. In this part of the tutorial, I'll explain the use case and the ways that CSS can be implemented in our web pages. But since this is supposed to be a beginner HTML tutorial, we will keep it simple and only have a review on the main concept and overall usage of CSS. Of course, you can expect in-depth CSS tutorials from us. I'll also have in mind to release tutorials on other technologies related to CSS like SCSS, Tailwind, and other frameworks and technologies based on it, so make sure to stay tuned to have a long journey in the world of front-end development with us. First of all, let's take a look at the syntax of CSS. To keep things clean, I create a new file and call it master.css. The name can be anything, but the extension must be .css. By doing this, I will have a CSS file that I can add styles to. The way that CSS works is by doing a selector and then open and close curly brackets, and between these two curly brackets we can have attributes, then colon, then values, then semicolon. We can add as many styles as we want to these selectors. The selector can be a standard HTML tag name like body, h1, img, or any other tag name that we have available in HTML. Also, it can be class or ID. Don't worry about class and ID because we'll talk about them in a bit, but for now, let's say that we want to style the body tag itself. This way, we can put the body inside the selector area. We can also have multiple selectors at the same time and style all of them by single style. This way we can have more efficient code. For example, HTML comma, body will affect both HTML and body tags. So this is the way that we can have multiple tags and have one style to affect the appearance of all of them. Now let's talk about attributes. Attributes are reserved names of CSS that can affect the appearance. For example, background is one of the CSS reserved attributes that we can set it to a color, for example, black. And this is a complete style. We have pointed a selector or two selectors or more. Also, we have set the background that changes the background of an element and have set it to black. And this way, HTML and body will have a black background if we implement this style into our code. So let's add one more style, and it will be color that changes the color of text and set it to white. And this way, the background of body will be black and the colors, the text that we put inside the body will be in white. Now let's save it and get back to HTML. And now we have three ways to implement styles. The first one and the most recommended one is using it and implementing CSS inside HTML using external CSS. The way that external CSS works is just like this. We have a complete.css file and we put all of our styles in it, and now we implement it inside our HTML by the link tag. And the link tag has two attributes here. One of them is a style sheet that tells the system this will be a CSS file, and the other one is href that must take the address of that CSS file. This way, this easy, we can implement external CSS in our pages. By saving it, you will see that the appearance of the page will immediately change and the style that we created here will be added to our page. The background is black now and the text is in white. The other way of implementing a style in our HTML is internal CSS. So far, we have experimented the external CSS, and now the internal CSS that we usually create inside our head tag, it works in body as well, but we usually do it inside the head, and the way that we do it is creating the style tag, and between these we can type our CSS code. Now if I create the HTML and body again and add some style to it, this will be implemented to our code as well. Let's cut these. Now we don't have any external, so the style will turn to default. And now let's paste this style inside this internal tags. So by saving it, the style will be added to the page again. And this is called internal CSS. So this will be external, this will be internal. And the last way of adding some style to codes is inline CSS. And the way that it works is adding a style attribute to a tag itself and then add styles to it. Let's cut this body from here and put it over here, and also cut the color and add it to our inline CSS. This way, when I save it, the style is still affecting the page. And these are the three ways that we can implement CSS code inside our HTML. In HTML, classes and IDs are the names that we create to assign to elements in order to access them via CSS and JavaScript. The difference between these two is that the class can be assigned to multiple elements, but an ID can be assigned to just one element in each document, and it must be unique in the whole HTML page. Let's start with classes. In this document, I have two elements, and also I've imported an external CSS, master.css, that we worked on in the previous parts. So I want to create a class here and then go to my HTML and assign it to whatever element that I want. The way that I can do that is by putting a period before the class name and then create a class name. This is optional and can be whatever we want, but we cannot, for example, create a class with a letter, with a number at the beginning. If I put a number at the beginning, it won't be a standard. Also, I cannot count on uppercase letters in the class name because HTML and CSS are not case sensitive. So whatever I create with uppercase will work on lowercase letters as well. For example, if I create green color with all lowercase, again, this one will be considered just like this one because both have the same letters, and uppercase and lowercase doesn't count in HTML and CSS. So I create my class with all lowercase letters, and now I'm ready to put some CSS style in it. For this specific class, I just want color green, and that's it. Now I have a class that I can assign to whatever element in my HTML, and the color of the text must be turned to green. I already have imported this CSS file, so now I'm absolutely ready to assign it to the elements. The way that we assign classes to an element is by using the class attribute. Class is a standard attribute that we can assign to any type of HTML element. We create the attribute, and as the value I put the class name here, and now as you see, the class is assigned to the first h1 and its color has turned to green. To assign it to another element, we do just the same. Class equals green, and now the second h1 is green as well. This is the way that we create and assign classes. Creating IDs is very similar to creating classes. The way we create IDs is by typing hash instead of period and then the ID name. This way we can create IDs. Also here we can have uppercase letters like this, and this will make difference with all lowercase like this. In JavaScript, HTML and CSS are still not paying attention to it, but in JavaScript that is case sensitive, this one will be different than this one, so pay attention to that. Also, if we want to make a space between words, we better use underscore instead of hyphen. Hyphen will work, but since JavaScript is a scripting language with operators, maybe in some cases, if we put a hyphen here, it can be considered a minus sign and act as an operating sign. So we better use underscore to make a space between words if we need it. So this is the way that we create IDs. The way that we assign IDs is the same. Let's create a background, for example, background black for this, and get back to our HTML, and this one will be assigned with ID attribute. We have another attribute, a standard attribute for HTML, ID, that will work this way. And we assign it to an element and it will affect the style as well. This is the way that we work with classes and IDs in CSS. But in the next chapter, that is about JavaScript, we will find out more about these two. JavaScript is a powerful scripting language that is used for front-end development. There are a lot of libraries, technologies, and frameworks created based on JavaScript, but in this part of the tutorial, we will be talking about pure JavaScript, and we'll see the way that we can implement it in our HTML documents. Just like CSS, we have three ways of importing JavaScript codes inside our HTML file: external, internal, and inline. In this section, we will review all these three methods. First, let's start with external JavaScript. I use this button to create a new file, and I call it master.js. Master is optional, it's the name of the file, and .js must be the extension of every JavaScript file that we create. So I press enter and create this blank JS file, and now I write a very, very simple JavaScript code like alert. And now whatever I type here must be the content of a pop-up that the alert function of JavaScript will create. So let's give it a string like external JS is working. and I save it. Now I have a JavaScript file with a simple function in it. Now I want to import it in my HTML file. The way we do it as external is by using the script tag, and this way we can import our file with giving the path to it as the src as the source, and master.js will be the value of this attribute. And now the external JavaScript is imported. Now by saving this, I must see a pop-up opens and this message showing up on the pop-up. So I save it, and as you see, external JS isn't work. So this is the way that we import external JavaScript. The way that we can use internal JavaScript is again using a script tag, and now we can type our JavaScript code right between these two. So again, alert, and this time internal JS is working, and by saving it again, I have a pop-up, and this time it says internal JS. So these are two ways of using JavaScript. The other one is creating function. For example, we get back to our JS file and I create a function over here, for example function, and name it something alr as alert, and this function will create the same alert, and this time it will say inline JS working. And now I have a function that I can call in my HTML file as alert. So I get back here and create a button, and I give it the function name as the onClick callback. OnClick is one of the JavaScript attributes that we can add to any HTML element and call any function that we have imported. So this way onClick will call the alert function of our external file. But before that, we need to, of course, import that external file again. So this way the function will be node. So let's give it a text. So we have it. Now if I click on it, inline JS is work, and this is because of this onClick attribute that is calling this alr function of our external file. And this is 3 ways that we can use JavaScript in our HTML. Congratulations! So far you've learned whatever you needed to know about HTML. Also, you learned how to use CSS and JavaScript codes inside your HTML file. At this step, you have enough knowledge to create any type of web page and website that can be built with HTML. But I managed to go one step further, and as the last section of this tutorial, build a simple website using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for you. From now on, you and me will be coding together and build a real website from scratch using these 3 technologies. Of course, as I said, this is supposed to be a beginner HTML course, and I'm not about to make it complicated for you. So we won't be diving so deep in CSS and JavaScript, but even touching the tip of this iceberg can be a good starting point for you to start learning CSS and JavaScript with more ease. So without any further ado, let's use whatever we learned in this course to develop a beautiful and responsive multi-page website that can make you ready for your next projects and also can be a good sample work for your portfolio. Okay, let's first create the bare bones of the template. I have created an HTML template directory here. I right click on it and click open, and then open with, and choose VS Code to open this directory with VS Code. This way I will have my HTML directory over here, and whatever I create inside it will be controlled by VS Code as well. So let's create the index.html page first, and as you see, it will be loaded just over here. This is The reason why I right clicked on it and clicked the Open with VS Code at the beginning. As you know, we want to use CSS and JavaScript in our template, so we need some files for that. Also, we need to use some images in our template, so we need some directories to keep the system clean. I create a directory called assets just beside HTML, as you see, and inside this directory I need to create 3 more directories. One of them is images that will hold the images. I paste my favicon over here, and also I need 2 more directories. One is CSS and one will be JS, and inside these 2 directories I want to create CSS and JavaScript files. Inside JS I create master.js, and inside CSS directory I create master.css. And now I have a CSS file and JavaScript file that I can import in my HTML and use it. So let's do that. And first of all, let's create the base template by exclamation mark and pressing tab on the keyboard. Now I change the title to home because I want this to be the main page. And now I use the link tag to import my CSS. rel will be a style sheet, and as href, as the address, I need to first give it the address to the file and then the file name. Assets will be the first directory. Inside assets I have CSS, and inside CSS I have master.css. Also, I'll do the same for importing the script by typing the script tag at the bottom of the body, and as src I do the same assets, this time JS, and then master.js. Now I have linked both my CSS and JavaScript files in my HTML. Let's test it to make sure it's working. So first of all, I go to master.css and create a test style, for example, background black for the whole page, and I save it. Now if I go to my index.html, right click on it and open with live server, as you see, I'm seeing a style change to black. So this means that my CSS is working. Now I want to change the wrapping method here so I see all of the code in my screen, not like this with horizontal scroll. To do that, I can press Alt-Z to change the wrapping method. Now I want to test the master.js as well to make sure it's linked and it's working. So I create an alert in my JS file that will say JS is connected. By saving it, I will have a pop-up saying JS is connected. It means that JS, of course, is linked to my HTML. Now I'm ready to go ahead and create my main layout. First, let's create our favicon by link. As rel, we type icon. As type, we will have image / xicon because it's a .ico file, and here as the address we will have assets, images, and favicon. Now let's go to body and create the main tags. First of all, at the top I need a header, and as you see, as you know, and we talked before, header is a standard HTML tag. Underneath we need a main tag, and at the bottom of the page we need a footer. Now beside this main tag I want to create an aside, a sidebar, and inside this header I want to create a nav, and inside the footer I want to have a section for copyright note at the bottom of the footer. So I create a section inside footer and call it class copyright. Now I can style it to see how it will look. First, let's give some different colors to different parts of the page. So I can type header to a style header and type something here. For example, background yellow. And I want to give another color to the main part so I can differentiate between them, and this one can be green. Aside can be gray, and footer will be blue. Also, I have a nav. I want to make it black, so background black. These are just sample colors to see what is where. Otherwise, we will change it later on. So I have another section for copyright that is called copyright. I have created a class for this. This is a custom class, and I want to give it a background color, for example, aqua. Now I don't see anything because none of these sections have any content. So let's create some content for them. And now I see header in yellow color. Also inside nav, I have the background color main, aside, same for footer, and same for copyright. Now I have all the sections in colors that I gave it, and I'm seeing them because they have some content. First of all, let's remove this little margin around the section so it will stick to the first of the page. This way we can go to HTML body and type margin 0 because it has a default margin, and by saving it, now we have all sections fixed from the first pixel of the page. And now we want to create styles for these. So header will stay at the top, nav will contain the main menu, aside will stick beside the main section, and copyright will be shown inside the footer. I went to pixabay.com and downloaded this beautiful image to use as the background image of our header section. So we need to replace it with this yellow color. Currently, the image is inside the assets directory, images directory. So the address is assets/images/banner.jpg. The way that we replace it with the color is, instead of this yellow color, we type URL, and inside this parenthesis we can give the path to the image. Currently we are working on master.css, so we are inside the CSS directory. To access this images directory, we need to go one upper level to get into the assets directory. The way that we do that, if you remember, is .. and /. Now we have access to this image since we have gotten out of the CSS and we are inside the assets directory currently. So I pick images and then banner.jpg. This is the way that we can address to upper level directories. By saving this, the yellow color is removed and a part of the image is visible. To see more of the image, let's set a height, for example 500 pixels for now, and more of the image is visible now. But as you see, the image is not covering only header, it's showing it in its real size. To fix the size of the image to our header section, we need to set another style that is background size and set it to cover. This way the image will cover only header and not more. By saving it, we have the image fixed to the header size. Back to our index page, we need to remove this sample text from the header now. So I remove this, save it, and now I only have the nav content over here. And instead of the sample text inside the nav, I want to create an actual menu as the main menu of the website. So I remove it and type UL and then LI star 4 to create 4 menu items. And by pressing enter, I will have 4 list items here. I hold the Alt key down on my keyboard and select all of these and press enter. Then I type A and press tab. So we have 4 links created here. For now, I don't give it any address. Later on, we can fill it. We just put a hash sign over here. And now we can create our menus. The first menu item will be home. The second one can be about. And the other one will be gallery. And the last one can be contact. So this way I have 4 links over here that can be considered the main menu of the website. And now I can go to CSS and style them. As you know, list items are block items. So we want all of them in the same line. So we need to change the style of those to inline or inline block. The way that we can do it is creating a new selector nav ULLI, because UL currently is inside nav and LI is inside UL. This is the way that we can link to the specific elements. So first parent, and then the other parent, inner parent, and then the tag itself. So now if I type, for example, display inline block and save it, now I have all the items in the same line. Now I want to change the link style. So again, I type nav ULLI and then A, because links are inside LIs now. So I type, for example, text decoration none to remove these lines underneath the links, so they're all removed. Also, I can set a color for them, color white, and now they are in white color. And also I want the font to be a little bigger, so I type font size, for example 20 pixels, and by saving this, the fonts are bigger now. Also, I want to change the font of the whole page to something else. For example, font equals normal, 80 pixels as the size, and 1.4 EM as the line height. And also the font family, I want it to be, for example, Arial. And this way I can change the font for the whole page, since I've styled the HTML body and all the elements are inside HTML and body. Now I have a better looking menu over here. The next step is styling the UL itself. And so I type nav UL, and first of all I change the list style to none, so the bullet points before any item will be removed, and then I remove the padding and margin by set them to 0. So now I have the menu stick to the top of the page. And now I want to create some distance between these items. The way that I can do that is setting a padding for list items, for example 10 pixel for top and bottom, and 13 pixels for left and right. By saving this, now I have some distance between list items. Here I have this logo.webp image inside my images directory, and I want it to be used as a logo and show up beside my menu just before the first menu item. The way that I can do that is going to index.html, and before the UL in the nav, inside the nav I create a div with class logo, and now I can get this class and go to CSS and style it. The way that I can do that is typing nav and then period logo, because first it's inside the nav, so before that we can have the nav and with a space we mention the class name, and before the class name, since it's a class, we need to specify it with a period. So now whatever we type here will be affecting that div with class logo. So let's type width 40 pixels, height 40 pixels, and then the background image will take a URL that, as you saw, it will be period images and logo.webp. Also, we want it to show up just once. We don't want it to be repeated, so we need to add no repeat here. And also we want to show this logo at the center of this .logo div. So we type center, and as the background size, we give it 80% background size. And now when I save it, we will have the logo over here. But as you know, div and UL both are block elements, so to show them beside each other, we need to add this display inline block. We need to assign this to both of them. So this way, both of them will be beside each other. As you see, we have a little bit of distancing issue that we can solve by typing vertical align top to the UL. This way, all of them will be in the same row. So as the last item of the nav bar, let's create a search box over here. The way that we can do it is going to index and inside the nav, and after the UL this time, we can create an input with type text and give it a class. For example, search, and then a placeholder that says something like search, so users will know what is it for. And now I can take this class and get back to CSS and start styling it. After this UL, I type nav and then period search for the search class, and here I have access to it and I can change the appearance. First of all, let's set the display to inline block, and then I can give it a float right to stick it to the right side of the page. And now let's give it some padding. For example, 5 pixels, and give it some margin to add some outer distance around the text box. Maybe 8 pixels. Yes, and now I can change the background border and text color by typing border 1 pixel solid style and maybe dark gray, and also background to a little darker gray, and also the text color to something lighter. And now I have a good search box over here, and I want to change the focus style when it's clicked and this default outline is around it. So I take this, repeat it, and now by calling focus, I can access the focus condition of it. So outline will be none. So now it won't do anything when it's focused, and I want to change the border or border color to something like this color. Now if I focus on it, a border will be changed. Now let's add a text over here underneath nav and inside the header. The way we can do it is going to HTML and after nav, and inside the header, just like here, we can create a div called header text, for example, and inside this div we can have h1 that says HTML template and underneath it can say an H2 my first HTML project. And this way I have both texts just after the nav. And I take this class and go to CSS to style it. So after the search and nav classes, I type header and period class name, and now I can change the style. First, let's change the color by typing color white. That changes the text color. And after that, let's add text align center to center the text. And now I want to do something. The thing that I'm gonna do is placing the text both at the center and at the middle of header. The way that I can do that is going to header and give it a position relative. By the way, if you want to select a word in VS Code, you can navigate on it and press Ctrl D, and the whole text will be selected. And now I can go to header text and here give it a position absolute. So the parent is relative and the child is absolute. Now the absolute item will work only inside the header. Otherwise it will be work with the whole page. So we need to set the position relative for the parent to wrap it inside the parent tag. So after that, I give it a top 50%, save it. Now it has 50% distance with the top. And also I give it a left 50%. And here it has started at the middle and also the center of header. But regarding the size of the child element itself, it's not fixed at the place that we want. So we need to add another style, that is transform, and translate X, that will be minus 50%, and also translate Y, that is minus 50% as well. Now we have a child element that has these two H1 and H2 elements inside, and it's both at the middle and at the center of the header. That header is position relative, the child has position absolute, top is 50%, left 50%, and transform has minus 50% and translate Y and X. This is the way that you can center and middle a child element inside the header. And now that the appearance of the header has shaped a little bit, so let's go to header and change this height to minimum height and set it to, for example, 200 pixels. So even if it has no content, the minimum height of header will be 200, otherwise it will stretch as much as the content. So I think 300 is a little better. So I add a no repeat as well here, no repeat, center, because it makes it fit better. So we have the header almost completed. As you see, elements are covering the whole width of the page currently. We don't want that. We want to have a box with a maximum width that if the screen is bigger than that, the box will be still that size and all of the content are inside that box. We usually use 1200 pixels as a max width of our wrapper tags. In this section, we will create a wrapper tag and put all of the main content of the page inside that. First, we need to create a class that we can use as a wrapper. So let's call it wrapper and give it a width equals to 1200 pixels and also max width 100%. And this way, the wrapper will stay 1200 pixels if the screen is in this size or larger. But if it's thinner than 1200 pixels, it will cover the whole width of the page. And now let's experiment it by copying this class name and creating a div inside this header with this class. And now I can put this navigation bar inside it to see how it looks. And as you see, it's now only 1200 pixels. But I want it to stay at the middle of the page, so I need to give it a margin 0 for top and bottom, and auto for left and right. This margin left and margin right auto make any div stay at the middle of the page. So this is the way that we can center a div without position absolute and that top and left 50%. So now let's give it a padding as well. So padding will be 20 pixels. And now I save it again, and if you notice, it's more than 100% width when the screen is less than 1200 pixels. And that's because of this padding. We need to include this padding in 100% so it won't exceed the 100% width when the screen is less than 1200. The way that we can do it is by box sizing and setting it to border box. And now this 20 pixels padding is included in the 100%, and the screen won't be more than 100% now. And to make sure that the header text won't exceed this 1200 pixels, let's give it a style. For example, max width 1200 pixels to the header text, so the header text won't exceed this 1200 pixels of our wrapper as well. Very good. Now that we have our wrapper set, we can put other elements inside it by just creating another wrapper. For example, here inside the main, we can create our wrapper and put the content, so we can make sure that the content won't exceed this 1200 pixels. For that, I cut this aside and put it inside the main, so I have both of them at the same place. And now I create a wrapper again and put this main inside this. And by doing this, my main and aside tags will be inside this wrapper and won't exceed this 1200 as well. Now before that, let's style the footer part. I want the footer to carry some vertical menus and also an about section, and underneath I want to put a copyright note for that. To do this, let's first create some menus here and some copyright here. The way that we can create copyright is using entities. If you remember that section, we can put and copy and a semicolon to show the copyright sign, this sign, and then type something here, for example 2012 to 2024 Arashtad and all rights reserved, something like this as the copyright note. And also, instead of this content, I create another wrapper, and inside this I will create two menus that will stay beside each other, and at the right side of them we will have a note for about us. If you remember, I said we will have 3 columns in the footer. 2 first columns will contain some vertical menu items, and the last one will be a little bigger and also will contain a text as about us. To do that, I want to use one of the CSS features called Flexbox. Flexbox helps us create column or grid system for the layout. And in this part, I will be describing it very smoothly and in very few details, but there are more to it, and you can have study and practice on it because it's a very useful feature of CSS. So I create a div called flexbox as the parent of these columns, and for each column I type flex and create 3 of these to have 3 columns. So I type some content, and by saving it, for now I have all of them in block display format because I've not styled them. But here I can go to my CSS and create a flexbox here by typing display and give it a flex. By saving it, I will have all of my divs, my flex items beside each other, and this is the way that we create flexbox. Now I want to give it a width 100% and also style the flex items, and each of them that has flex 1 class will have 1 value for flex, and if it has flex 2 class, the size will be twice. Now I can go to my HTML and give these two one more class that is flex 1, and give the last one flex 2, so it's twice. So we have each of them 25% of the page, the wrapper, and this one is 50% because this has flex 2 value, flex 2, and these ones are flex 1. So the number that we give to flex of the flex item will be divided by the number of flex items in the flex box and also the width of flex box itself. Now let's get back to our HTML and create some menus here by typing UL and LI and give each one, for example, 5 menu items. And now let's type something inside them. For example, menu item. And now we have some menu items over here. Now let's create a text here for about us with h2 title that says about me, and underneath a p tag that has some placeholder text. And this will be about, and these will be the menus. Also, let's create some titles for these menus by h2, and now by removing these two, the height must be a little more fixed. Okay, now it's better. Now all the heights are the same and it looks better. Now let's go to our CSS and style the footer to, for example, the background size will be dark gray. The color will be lighter. For example, let's say this color, and also footer UL, the menu items, will have no list style, so the bullet points will be removed this way, and also paddings and margins of the ULs will be removed. this way. Also, I want to work on this copyright so it won't have any background, just like this. And I want it to be inside a wrapper as well. So I cut this text and create a wrapper and put it inside a p tag over here. And now I can style this. So let's say font size is 90%, smaller than the regular font size of the layout, and also the color is darker, so it won't be in the face a lot. And we want it to be in less padding and margin. So the p tag will be with padding 5 pixels and margin 0. And now it looks better. Now let's add a border at the top of the copyright section. Border top will be 1 pixel, solid style, and the color will be a little lighter than the footer background. And now we have a line over here, and this will be our footer. Now let's add some links to this menu items at the footer by creating an A tag. And now these items are linked. So we need to style them to look better. So let's say footer, UL, LI, and A, because these menu items are inside, first of all, footer, and then inside an LI, UL, LI, and as A. So we need to access them this way. And it will be text decoration none to remove the underline, the line underneath the images, and we need to change the color to the same color of menu, the footer, and also we can change the color to white on hover. So when it's hover, the color will be white. This way makes a little difference. And let's the header of any widget, any module to be lighter, and that will be footer H2, since we used H2 for title of the modules, and make the color white. And now the headings are in white color. Now if I change the width of the window, you see that the columns are responding to the change and will be still displaying as column. So far so good. Now that we have the header and footer, we need to work on the main part as well. So let's get back to this main and wrap it inside Flexbox, and also give the class Flex to both of these. Now I want to remove it from here and paste it just beside main instead of inside it. So both will be flex, and now these are beside each other. But I want it to be flex 1 to take 25% of the width, but I want it to be flex 3 to take 75% of the width. So I create another class called flex 3, and I add it here and set it to flex 3. This way I will have a 75% width main part and 25% width a side part. And now make the style more real by putting some real content over here. For example, an H2 that says main part of the template, and underneath we will have a p tag with some sample text. Also, I paste it over here and change the title to sidebar. And now I want to work on a style a little bit more, so the main background will be removed, and instead I want to give it a padding equals to 20 pixels to make some distance between the main part and the sidebar, and also the padding of sidebar will be 20 pixels as well. This way I have a template that is laid out very well, and it works pretty much the way that we want. Okay, before going ahead, let's take a look at this code. I want to comment out these two parts, the content of main and aside, for a minute and see what happens. If you see, although we have the layout styled, when we have no content on the main part of the screen, the style is short, and underneath footer and copyright we have some blank space. A good idea is setting min height for the main part, so even if the content is not there, the style won't be interrupted this way. The way that we can do it is, of course, going to main and setting min height for it. Min height, and I want to set it to, for example, 3 VH, that is 30% of the height of the screen. And if it's not enough, we can add to it by, for example, 4 VH, and this way, even if content is not there, the min height of the main part will be 40% of the whole height of the window. I brought the content back, and now I have the page with full content, and I want to show you something. If I decrease the width of this window this way to something like tablet and mobile, you see that the page is not laid out well and elements are overlapping each other, and even those that are not overlapping have no enough space to show completely. And this brings us to another concept in CSS and web design that's called RWD, or responsive web design. In this section of the tutorial, I want to show you how you can build responsive layouts to support all types of devices, from mobiles and tablets and other screens. Unlike its big name and its importance, RWD, or responsive web design, is not that big of a deal in case of coding. The main asset that we have for this purpose is the media query of CSS. Media query is a feature in CSS that helps us detect the width of the window in real time and assign some style to it. So let's say that we want to create a style for mobile. In that case, we create a media query and set it for 768 pixels width, that is the width of mobile, and create some styles for some elements that we want. In that case, whenever the window width is in that size or less, the styles will be applied to those specific elements. Otherwise, it won't work. It may be a little bit confusing for you at this step, but when we get to codes, you will be familiar with it and very comfortable with it so fast. So let's get to VS Code and make our layout responsive. We are using a layout with three main sections: header, main, and footer. Since header has this nav inside it and we want to work on it a little bit, maybe starting with it is a little complicated. So let's first proceed with main and footer, and then we will work on header. The scenario is creating a media query that is triggered when the width of the window is as much as a mobile or less, and makes all these flex boxes block and covering the whole width of the page. So they will be block instead of flex when the width is mobile or less. The way that we want to create a media query is very easy. Just put an @ sign and type media next to it, and then since we are working on a screen, we need to type only screen, and then an and keyword, and inside the parenthesis we can mention the size that we are looking for. In this case, we are working on max width 68 pixels. So this style will work only if the maximum width of window is this much. Otherwise, it won't work. So let's first experiment it with body and turn the background color of the body section to green when the width of the window is less than mobile. So I decrease it, and as you see, the background color is changed. And this is how the media query works. It's very simple. Now let's proceed with the main style. I want this flex box and this flex to be blocked and with width 100%, so I want to mention it here, and also I put a comma and I add this flex as well. So both flexbox and flex will be display block and also width 100%. This way, on mobile screens, all these flex boxes will be considered block and will cover the whole width of the page. As you see, it's working just like this. Also, I've set the main height for this. I can remove it over here. I don't want to do it, but I'm just saying that I can make any changes that I want for this media query. So now we have all these flex boxes responding to the screen. This is the way that we create flex boxes or any other type of element display block. Good. We have all these flex boxes block now, and now I want to show you how you can hide something on mobile screen instead of just changing the display block. We can change the display block to display none to hide something. For example, in this case, we want to get this search box that has the search class and hide it when the screen is as wide as mobile. So display none will be the style, and this way we can hide the search box when it's smaller. I think I've made a mistake on this one because the search box, okay, I've mentioned nav before search and have set it to inline. Now I better to add the nav over here, and it works now. And these happen a lot in CSS coding. Maybe it's not logical at the first glance, but actually there's a logic behind it. So now I have hidden this search box on mobile screen, and I haven't it anymore. The next step of working on mobile is that I want to hide the menu items, and instead of this menu items, I want to create an icon here. So whenever the mobile is shown, the mobile layout is shown, that icon will be shown instead of the menu items, and whenever that icon is clicked, the menu will show up, and by toggling the icon, by clicking it twice, the menu item will be hidden. Before doing that, let's make some changes on the nav itself, and here we have the nav and set the background to black. So I remove this background here, nav and set the background to none, so it won't have any background on mobile. And now I want to put this logo at the middle, so I get back to see how logo is styled. And we have this display inline block, and now we want to change it to display block. Over here. And also I want to give it a text align center, or maybe I've set the size for it. Yes, I've set it to 40 pixel width and height, so I work on it instead of text align. So it will say width and height will be, for example, 70 pixels now that we have more space. And also, since I've set the width, I can give it a margin auto now, and it will work. Otherwise, without setting the size, margin auto will not work. Now it will be placed at the center. Now it's time to hide these menu items, but before that, let's style them, so when we hide them and show them, it will be in a good shape. To do that, I need to style this UL. So I get back to my media query and create a style for the UL. And here I say background color black. And also I change the style of list items to display box, so it will cover the whole width of UL. And now I have it over here. Also I can give it the width. So the width will be, for example, 90%, and this will cover the whole page, but I think 95 is better. We always have some experimenting while styling. It's like painting and drawing. So now if you pay attention, we have the header text overlapping the menu. We want the menu to be over all of the objects, so we need to set a position for it and set it to absolute, and then we want to create a z-index record for it, and z-index detects the layer, actually specifies the layer. So now that we have it set to 2, it will be in a layer over the header text and it covers it. So let's again work on this width. Now that we have changed it to absolute, now it's a good shape, so we can show and hide it with more confidence. The way that we want to show and hide this menu item is by using a class called open. So if this UL has a class called open, the menu item will be shown, otherwise it will be hidden. So first of all, we set the display to none, and now we don't have the image, but we create another style, nav UL and open. This way, when the UL has class open, the display will be block. And this is the way that we show or hide an element. Now if I remove it and save it, it will be hidden. Later on, we will use JavaScript to remove or place this open class when a toggle that we will create over here is clicked. So let's create a toggle by typing #toggle and create an ID toggle. And now we want to give it an HTML entity, if you remember from the entity section of the tutorial. And if I'm not mistaken, 8801 is the entity code for the bar icon. We will have a simple bar icon over here that now we can style. So let's get back here and create a nav and then hash toggle. We use hash because it's an ID instead of period. So let's give it a font size a little bigger, for example 250%. And also I want it to be in white color. Okay, now let's give it a background and set it to black. And also I want it to be positioned as absolute with 20 pixel distance from top and left of the header. Now I have it over here. If I add some padding to it to make the background color a little more visible, I will have the button over here. Now I want the cursor to be a pointer when it hovers over it. So I want to type cursor and set it to pointer. By doing this, when I hover over it, my cursor changes to a pointer. Now let's bring this menu a little bit top to stick to this icon a bit more. So I set a top position for UL and set it to 20 and maybe 60 pixels. And yeah, that's a good place. Now the scenario is that this will be hidden, and by clicking it, the menu will be open. By clicking a toggle again or toggling it, the menu will be hidden again. So to do that, we need to work on media query as well. So first of all, let's remove this open class from here, and now it's working just as expected. Now let's test the media query. Now we have everything mixed up, as you see. We want to hide this item when the screen is wider than mobile size. So first of all, let's do that. So I get this, get back to my style, and over here, just after nav, I say nav hash toggle will be hidden at the beginning. Now I have the menu style back, and now I want to show this on mobile screen. So I get back to media query and say display block. So it shows up only on mobile screen. At this step, we need to create a JavaScript function so it detects the clicks on this toggle button. So whenever the menu is closed and has no open class, it will assign an class to it as open, and whenever it has the class, it will remove the open class. So the menu will be shown or hidden by clicking on this toggle icon. The best practice is giving this UL an ID to access it easier on JavaScript, and let's call it menu. And now we have two IDs, toggle and menu. So let's get to our master.js and create our script by typing document and add event listener. and then DOM content loaded will be a function that we want to create. And here we need to create two variables. Variables are the names that we create and we can assign to an element, an object, or something else. In this case, we want to create two variables that one can get the toggle and the other one can get the UL. But since the elements are not supposed to be changed, instead of variables that is created by var or let's create constants that is created by const and name the first toggle that is equal to document, and then get elements by ID and set it to toggle. And now this constant with name toggle would look in the document and find the ID toggle in our HTML page, that is this one. Another constant will be menu that we want to point it to our UL. Again, document, get elements by ID, and this time menu. Now we have two constants that we can access to in JavaScript. So let's get the toggle that we have created over here and add an event listener to it that works on click, meaning that whenever it's clicked, the function after it will be executed. And what the function does is getting the menu and after that the class list and toggle its class from open to blank. This way, when this toggle is clicked, this function will be executed and affects the menu that we got here from the menu ID and changes the class open, toggles the class actually. If it has the class open, it will remove it, otherwise it will add it to it. So by saving it and now clicking on it, as you see, the class is being added to this menu, to this UL by clicking on this toggle, and the menu is showing in hiding or toggling. And the way that we can notice the change of the class is that right-clicking on the page and selecting this inspect. This can be different in different web browsers, but in all of them usually inspect is mentioned. Inspect, inspect element, element inspector, or something else. This is called Firebug. This was called Firebug and was produced by Firefox at the beginning, but nowadays all of the major browsers have in their developer tools, even Microsoft Edge. So click on it and let's find the element that is over here. By doing this, for example, if I find an element, I can right click on it and click inspect, and this way that specific element is selected. Now as you see, it has the class open, but if I click on this toggle, this class will be removed. And this is the reason this menu is being shown or hidden. Very well, we have created our responsive layout so far. Now let's make a little bit more tweak on it, so to make it a little even nicer, and after that we will create our inner pages that are about, gallery, and contact. To do that, I'd like to first of all change the style of a menu a little bit, and I go here for it and change the style of nav. For example, I'd like to give it a padding equals 20 pixels, so it's a little bigger, but not this much. 10 pixels is better. Okay. Also, I want to remove it from mobile, so it says padding 0. It has no padding. The mobile cell will stay the same. Also, let's make it a little bit bigger, the input one, and I find it in search. Yeah, it is here, and I want to give it a border radius, and set it to something like 7 pixels, and look at it. By saving it, the border around it will be a little 7 pixel radius. Now I want to add more padding to it, or maybe changing the text size, the font size, to 110%, and set the width to less than it, so it won't exceed more than 150 pixels. Okay, it looks better. And reduce the margin now, maybe 6, maybe 5. Okay, it looks better. Also, let's add a border radius around this nav bar. So border radius 7 pixels. And also I want to make it a little transparent, this color. The way that we can do it is using RGBA. That R, G, and B are the colors, and A is for opacity or transparency. This way, if I set 0, 0, 0, that is the code for black color, and set the last one to 0.5, it will be 50% transparent and the background will be seen. And also for the other part, we can have some tweaks. For example, let's give a little background to the sidebar to differentiate between it and the content. So I find a side part and set a background color to it and set it to, for example, light gray. And now it looks better. Also a little bit of border radius maybe. Okay, it looks a little better now. And that's it. Now let's create other pages from this main page, main template, and fill them so we can see that how we can deliver our content on the main section. So we have built our layout, but it's just the main page. When I click on the other links, I have no inner pages, so the navigation is not working and it's not linked. So let's get back to our VS Code and here create some pages. I right click on it, copy, and hit Ctrl V 3 times. And now by selecting each one and clicking on this rename, I can change the name. Also, I can select them or simply press F2 on the keyboard and name the other pages. And this way I can create my about, gallery, and contact pages as well. And the way that I want to link them is by typing the name of the document over here as the link, as the href. So it will be about, this will be gallery.html, and the last one is contact.html. And this is a complete linking environment. I want to go to home and paste it over here. Contact will have the same menu, and also gallery. Now I have a complete functional navigation for my website. But since we're not supposed to link to the self page, we can replace the link of the same page to hash. For example, in this gallery.html, we can remove this. In about, we can remove this link. In contact, we remove this and replace it with hash. And also in home page, we'll remove the home link. Now we have a website with a functional menu that I can, for example, navigate from this contact to about, from about to gallery, from gallery to home, and the menu on all pages is working. Also, another good idea is highlighting the menu item on a page that is currently being navigated. For example, if we are in home, we can add a class active over here and add this class to other pages as well. In contact, this menu will be highlighted. In about, the about menu is highlighted as well, and in gallery, this one. And now we can go to our CSS and say that nav ULLIA that has the class active will be in the same style as its hover. So we add another selector by putting a comma here and adding one more selector that uses the same style. So by doing this, now that I'm inside home, the home is highlighted. If I go to about, the about will be highlighted. This way we can differentiate between active and passive menu items. Good. Before going ahead, there's a small thing that is bothering me, and it's the placement and look and feel of this header text. So let's bring it a little bit lower and put a background shadow behind the text. So I can, let's say that we want to search for this. Of course, we can press Ctrl F and search for header, and this way we can find the things that we are looking for. In this case, we're working on the header text, so let's change this 50% to 60% to bring it a little lower. Okay, and to put a text shadow behind the text, we need to add text shadow and give it a number for X, Y axis, and also the amount of blurriness, and at the end, the color. Now we have a slight shadow behind these text. Okay, so we have the page completed and also the inner pages. Now let's say that we want to turn this main page to a blog. So we have some articles that are shown as blog articles with some little images and also a read more button here. To do that, we will be using a semantic HTML tag called article that we talked about before. Okay, I fast forwarded this part, but in the meantime, I went to pixabay.com and downloaded these 4 beautiful images of nature. Remember that these are in JPEG format, JPG, but in case of SEO and have a more optimized image, we better have images in WebP. So WebP is the most recommended format for images in our web pages. So let's create some articles, sample article, semantic elements, and put these images and some content as the article of those blog items. So let's get back to index.html, and now I cut this part and create an article, and inside it I create a flex box, and here I want to create a flex for image and also another flex for the content. So these will be 2 flex boxes here, and now I want this one to show a little bigger, so I give it flex 2 for now. Later on we will experiment, and this one will be flex 1. And here inside the first column I want to create an image text, image tag, and give it the address to the image, assets, images, and block1.jpg. And here for example, let's say beauty of nature, and give this title as the alt text of this image as well. So now that I save it, it's looking just like this. Of course, this is not what we wanted, but we have CSS to help us to make it look better. So flex 1 will be this, and flex 2 will be article. Now we create a tag for images over here before the media query and say img width 100% to see if it works. And as you see, now it only stretches as much as the flex box. Now let's create another class called padding, or let's call it block, and it will be a block that contains the content, and I want to give it a padding 20 pixels. Now I can assign this block to any tag that I want, so I create a div with class block over here and put this image in it, so it will have 20 pixels padding around it. Now it looks much better. Now let's remove some of this text to make it more fit, and also add a link underneath with a p tag that has an A inside it, and it's linked somewhere and says learn more. And also it has a class called btn for button. Now we have this class to style and create the style of our button. So I get back to CSS and mention the class name, and here I give it a display inline block first to be able to give it padding and margin, because display inline is the default style of link, anchor link, and I want to give it a padding, so I type padding 10 pixels for example, and also give it a background. I'd like to take the color from here so all will look the same. And also I want to change the color to white because the background is a little dark now. And also I want to remove the underline from the link, so I set the text decoration to none, and now I have a button over here. Let's give it a border radius to make it a little nicer, and I set it to 7 pixels, and now we have a button over here. As you know, we can have another style for the hover of the button, and in this case we can change the background color to something else. Let's make it a little darker like this, and now when I hover over it, the background changes. Also, the padding is assigned to all the 4 sides, top, bottom, left, and right. But if we want to differentiate between sides, we can use this as top and use this right use this as a button, and the last one will be assigned to left. So I want to have a top and bottom 10 pixels and left and right 50 pixels. And now the button is looking much better. Also, we can set the button to right side. For example, if we give it another class, this P a class, to text right. This is a made up class, of course. And here we assign it to text aligned right. Now the buttons will be showing up over here. And now we have a complete article with image, title, some text, and a read more button. Now we can copy and paste this several times to have some more. And it will be from here to here. Second, third, and fourth article. And here we need to change the image addresses. This one to block 2, this one block 3, and this one to block 4 to have 4 different images. And now we have a better looking block over here. And this is the way that we can create a bare bones of a blog style. Also, as you remember, since we have styled and created media queries for Flexbox, if I decrease the width, the blogs will still be responsive and respond to the page. So we now have a responsive blog. Now it's time for the easy part, and it's the About page that is a simple content page. We already have it, sort of. And now I just want to change the content a little bit and make it a little longer. And for example, change this heading to About Us, and also change this to something longer, lorem 200 maybe, and see how it looks now. Okay, and this will be a simple content page for About. The next one is Gallery. Now we want to create some boxes with some images, and then use CSS to style the boxes, and after that use JavaScript to create a function to open a pop-up when one of these images is clicked. The way I want to do that is again using my Flexbox and putting 4 images in each row, and after that styling it using CSS and adding functionality using JS. So let's go to gallery.html and change the title to something like image gallery, like this, and remove this sample text and replace it with Flexbox class that has a flex inside. And inside this flex, there's another class called thumbnail that I want to wrap around the image, and inside this thumbnail, I want an image. So this is the Flexbox, this is the flex, and also I have another tag called thumbnail over here that I can use to style the appearance of the image better. So here I give it the address to my image, assets images blog 1, and an alt as well. And now I copy this and paste it 3 more times by changing the image address like this. And now I have 4 images beside each other. Before going ahead, let's give all these Flexboxes a Flex1 class as well, because we want all of them to be as wide as each other, and then copy this thumbnail class, go to CSS and create a new selector for it, and also a thumbnail image. And here we want to set the aspect ratio of all images to 16/9 for all of them to look in the same aspect ratio. Also, I want to add an internal distance with padding and set it to 5 pixels, and also an external distance with margin 5 pixels again. And now I have distance between these images. Now let's give them some border. By border, for example, 5 pixels and solid style, and set it to light gray, something like this. And I'd like to give it a border radius as well and set it to 7 pixels. And this is summer 2024, and I hope you're enjoying the voice of this bird like me. And now I have a better shape for my gallery. Now let's do some more and set the cursor to pointer, so when I hover my mouse over this images, the cursor will change to pointer this way. And also I want to copy this and create a style for hover, and in that case I change the border color to something else. For example, this one. And now I have another color. Actually, let's copy this image, this color that is more appealing to our layout style. Okay. And now we are ready to add more functionalities. Also, as you know, if I change the size of the page, it will be block and the images won't be too much small. Now let's create a pop-up window, so whenever one of these images is clicked, the pop-up opens and loads the image in a bigger version. To do that, we need to get back to our HTML code, and right after footer and before the script tag, we need to create an element called IDE pop-up, and inside it we need another element with an ID, like for example pop-up content. And inside this one we need two elements. One of them will be the close button with an X inside it, and the other one can be another ID like pop-up image. And the scenario is whenever one of these items is clicked, JavaScript will receive the src attribute of that specific image and loads it inside this by creating a new dynamic img tag. So let's style it first by going to CSS and typing #popup to style the pop-up first, and set the position to fixed. And we want it to show at the top of all the layers, so I give it an index, z index 3, and also I want it to be started at the top left corner of the page, so top 0 left 0. Also I want it to be 100% width and cover the whole height of the page, so I give it 100% width and 100% height. Also I need to give it a background color to be recognizable, and the background color will be RGBA, something like black but 30% transparent. So by doing this, I will have my pop-up layer over all of the content. The next step is creating a style for this pop-up content that will be inside this pop-up wrapper. So we type #popup content and give it a position absolute. And if you remember from the previous section, we give it a top 50% and left 50%, and also a transform with translate x minus 50% and also translate y minus 50%. This way I can have the pop-up at the middle of the screen. Also, I want to give it a width equals to 600 pixel and max width 100%, so it won't exceed the screen. And also I want to set the aspect ratio to 16 and 9. And by giving it a color background like light gray, we will have it over here. Now let's give it some border radius by adding border radius and set it to, for example, 7 pixels. And now it's time to style this close button. So back to CSS and type close, and we want to give it a position absolute. Top will be this time minus 15 pixels and right minus 15 again. And as a background, we can set something that for now we can see it easily. Now it's over here, and we want to give it a width that's equal 30 pixels and also height 30 pixels. And let's change the text color to white and text align to center, so the X letter will be sitting at the center. So this is the close button we will have. And now let's change the background color a little bit to something a little darker than the pop-up background, just like this. And we want to change the color maybe a little darker, so the X will be noticeable. And also I want to add a cursor pointer to it, so when the mouse hovers over it, the cursor will be changed to pointer. We will be using this little close button to close the pop-up, of course. And now we want to round it the way that it's not a square anymore. The way that we can do it is by adding a style to border radius and set it to 50%. This way, if the width and height of an element is equal and we give it a border radius of 50%, it will be rounded just like this. And now I want to add one more style to the hover part of it, and when it's hovered, I want the background to be something like orange, like this. Now I have it orange when it's hover. And another cool feature of CSS is transition that creates a very simple animation. If I set it to, for example, all and give it 1s as 1 second, now the color that is supposed to change on hover will change, but with 1 second of simple animation, transition actually. We can have less than 1 by typing decimal numbers like this. This one will be 300 milliseconds, and also it works without 0. As I said at the beginning, the purpose of this pop-up is loading an image in a bigger size. So for just experimenting, let's put an image here and give it the address to one of our images, for example like this, and load something here. And as you see, it loads here, but we want it to be looking nicer. So let's give it a padding just here and set it to 5 pixels. And as you see, it already has a padding equals to almost 5 pixels. So by doing this, the padding bottom will be much more, but we need to remove it this way and set the padding bottom to 0. And now it looks very good and almost the way that we want it. And the width is 100 pixels. The thing that I'd like to change is just setting this to 90 pixel max. And now in all cases it will be visible. The whole pop-up window will be visible. And now that we created a whole style, we need a functionality so we can hide and show this pop-up. The way that we want to do it is just by adding a class open to it or removing it using JavaScript. So let's create a pop-up with class open. So we say hash pop-up dot open. So if the pop-up window has class open, the display will be block. Otherwise, as default, display is none. This way, when pop-up has the class open, it will show up, but if it's removed like this, it will disappear. And the scenario is, after clicking on one of these items, JavaScript that has been listening for this click will recognize the path to that image, opens the pop-up window by adding an open class to this pop-up ID and loading the image inside this pop-up image just like this. But that will be a dynamic IMG tag that JavaScript will add. And for now, we have it empty, and also we remove this class since JavaScript will add or remove it for us later on. Now let's get to our JS code. And first of all, I want to add a comment here. The way that I add comments to JavaScript is by adding 2 / for a single line comment. So let's add a comment like toggle menu functionality. So later on that I forget about this code, when I see this comment, I will know that what this part of the code is supposed to do. Now add another comment for the pop-up window of the gallery. So now I'm ready to retrieve some elements on the page. The way that I do that is typing const, and let's call the images just image and set it to document query selector. We need to use query selector because the images have class but they have no IDs. And here I can mention a class that can be assigned to each of them. So we need all these images to have some classes, and for that we have this gallery image added as class to all of these images. So back here and dot gallery image, because query selector can select more than just classes, so we need to mention that this is a class or this is a tag or another element. So this way I can get all of the images in this document. Also, we need to access pop-up content and close button, and to do that we need to create some more constants, and for example call a main one pop-up and set it to document get element by ID and set it to pop-up. That will be this element over here. Just copying and pasting it is a good idea to not make any typo, Another one will be const, and let's call it pop-up content this time, and set it to document get element by ID. I have a typo over here. Okay, and as the ID, let's give it this pop-up image because we want to load the image inside this element. So now I have the pop-up image inside this pop-up content constant. And the last one will be another constant with name close that is equal to document get element by ID again, and this time close just as the ID of this item. Now I have all the elements and I'm ready to create the functions to load the image and close the pop-up. First, let's add an event listener to the document itself by document.addEventListener and set it to click. So any click on the document will be detected and compared with this function conditions. And here we need to get the event, the item that is clicked. And here we need to add an if statement and say that if the target of this event that is clicked has the class of one of these images, that will be gallery image, do something. So the document will listen for any type of click, and if the click is happening, it will get the event function that has been done, the event target that has been clicked on, and if that event target has a class gallery image, it means that the clicked item is one of these images because only we have this class for these 4 gallery items. So if that's the case, we test the functionality with an alert, image is clicked, and now let's test it. I click on each part of the page and nothing happens, but as soon as I click on it, one of these images pop-up opens and loads the string that I gave it. So now that we have the condition working, we are good to go and create the real function. So if one of these images are clicked, each of them will be an image and will have an src, a source. So first of all, we need to find that source. So we say const src, for example, equals event target. That will be one of these images and src. This way we can extract the src attribute from the clicked item that will be one of the images, because we have this if statement, and if it's not an image, this part won't be executed. At this step, we need to create another constant and name it something like img and type document, and this time create element because we want to create an img element dynamically and set it to img. This way, this HTML tag will be created inside the document, and now we can use it or insert it whenever we want. But before that, we need to set the src of this HTML img tag to the src that we got from this event target. So this is the src that we extracted, and now we set the src extracted from the clicked item as the src of this dynamically created img tag. And now we have the IMG that we can load inside our pop-up content. The pop-up content is this item that is supposed to get the IMG, the one that we experimented with a manually created IMG tag. So we'll load it, we'll load the image inside this pop-up content element. So we need to say pop-up content append child, that is one of the JavaScript methods, and give it this IMG over here that we created just here. And by doing this, the image will be loaded here. This will be a dynamic IMG tag that we created just here, not a manual created HTML tag. And also we need to get this pop-up and give it an open class so it will show up. So pop-up class list dot add open will add a class open to our pop-up. Now let's save the document and test it by clicking on this one, and as you see it opens. But when I click on the close button, nothing happens because we have not created any function for this close button. Now let's create a function for this close button, so whenever it's clicked, the pop-up will be hidden and also this image will be removed from the pop-up content element. First, let's get this close item that we gotten from our HTML document and add an event listener to it for listening for clicks on it. So whenever the close item is clicked, this close button is clicked, this will be executed and the function will work. So the function here, and now we need to create a constant and call it IMG that gets the image inside the pop-up content using a query selector. So we type IMG to find any IMG that already is inside this pop-up content. Now let's save it and create an if statement and say if IMG, it means that if there is IMG inside this pop-up content, this will be triggered. And what happens is that the IMG will be removed, and we do it by remove child instead of append child this time. So I type remove IMG, and this is supposed to be working. And also, just like here, that we added the open class to the function, we need to now remove it from our pop-up. And this is supposed to work seamlessly. Now let's test it. Clicking on the close button will close it. The other image is loaded. Again, it's closed. Now all the images are working. Also, if I click on it, open the pop-up and inspect this pop-up element from here, you see that image is dynamically generated inside it. The image element is created inside this pop-up image, but when I close it, the image is removed. Again, if I click one more image, the other image will be loaded, inserted dynamically by JS. And this is the way that we can create pop-ups using JS. Hope this was not so complicated, but I promise I won't go further in JS and won't make you more confused. Debugging is a very important topic in JavaScript. So far we have created some scripts, but before going ahead, let me show you one more thing. If I go to a page other than gallery and here click the inspect, or instead hit the F12 key on my keyboard and then go to the console tab, I will notice an error here. These are called console errors that are generated by JavaScript. The reason why JavaScript is generating this error in this specific case is that since this script is running all over the website and I'm not inside the gallery.html and have no elements with these classes and IDs, JavaScript is looking for these elements to assign these constants to, and so it cannot find them and say that I cannot find these. This is an error. The idea to prevent this type of errors is assigning a class or an ID to the body tag of the gallery and then dedicating this part of the script only to that specific class and ID. This way, the script will look for that class or ID in the body tag, and if there's no class or ID in that specific body of that page, for example, about or any page other than gallery, this won't be executed. Otherwise, it means that it has found that class or that ID, so this script will be executed since that will be the gallery. So let's go to the gallery.html page, and here inside the body tag, create a class and give it a class like gallery, for example. And now we need to get back to master.js and create an if statement here by typing if, and inside the parenthesis we define the condition, and after that the script that will be this part. So as the condition we need to type document.body.classList.contains, and inside another parenthesis mention the class name. This means that if this class name contains in the class list of the body tag and the loaded HTML, so do this. Otherwise, don't do anything. This way, this part of the script will be executed only on gallery page or any other page that has the gallery class in its body. As you see, as soon as I save this, the page reloads and the error is gone. Now, if I navigate to another page, I still have no error, and when I go to gallery, I have no error, but the script is functioning. It means that it's working in the gallery page, but it's not working on other pages. And this is the way that we can remove this type of errors. Now that we have all the three other pages ready, it's time to create a contact form in this contact page as the last page of our template. So let's remove this content and replace it with a simple contact us form and then style it using CSS. So I minimize this and open my contact.html, and here I change the title of the page to say contact us. And also I remove this and replace it with a form. For this tutorial, we're not about to work on action or method or any back-end functionality. Just we create a form and style it. And for the first two rows, I'd like to use my flexbox because I want them to be beside each other. The first and the second input, that will be for name and also email. So I create two flex items inside it this way. And now for each of them, we will have a label. The first one will be for the field name, that is saying name. And underneath, after a BR, I create an input with type text that has a name, just like what we said over here. Now I have a label, an input, and I want to add a placeholder here that says your name, for example. Now that I have this field, I can simply copy this part and paste it inside the other flex. And I want to change this to email, and also the text to set email. Also, I need to change this type to email, so we'll have an input with type email over here, and also with the name email that says your email as the placeholder. And this way I will have two fields exactly like I wanted. And now after this flexbox, I need to create another label for message that says your message a BR to break the line and go to the next one, and here again a text area that has name message, and also we can have placeholder for text areas too that says message. Now I have a message box as well, and as the last row I create another BR and an input with type submit, and as the name we can have submit, so later on we can access it in PHP or other scripting languages. And also as a value or the text of the button we can say something like send image, send message, for example. And now I have all the elements and I'm ready to style them using CSS. So let's go to CSS, and here I create a style for input type text, and also input type email. Also, I want this style to affect a text area, so I add it after comma, and here I can style them by display block with 100% padding 5, and also since we have both with 100% and also we have a padding, we better add a box sizing border box, and I want to increase the font size to 100%, and it's looking a little better now. So let's give it a border radius equals 7, and also change the border to something like 1px solid and gray. Maybe 2 pixels, looks a little better. Now we want to remove this default outline effect, so we need to repeat all of these and add a colon focus, and then here we can set the outline to none, and also set the border color to whatever we want. Let's get our color from here and paste it over here, and now when it's focused the color will be set as expected. But here, as you see, we have a small problem. The style that we wrote here is affecting this search box, but we want this style to only affect the items inside the form. So we need to add a form over here. And this is why we mention parent classes sometimes. And by adding this form, the other elements in the page will remain untouched. Now let's work on this input a little bit and make it nicer. If you remember, here inside our home page we had styled some buttons with a class button. These are assigned to the class button, so if we go to our submit button and give it a class button, the style must be looking something similar. So let's give it a class btn, and now by saving it, it looks much more like the button that we have in our block, but it has some differences because this one has been assigned to an input instead of link. So let's make both of them similar to each other. So I type form, input, type submit, and now I need to set the font size to 100% and also remove the border by typing border none. And now it looks much more similar to these buttons over here. As you can tell, the style of this form is a little bit better, but not perfect yet. So let's work on it a little bit more and close this chapter. So I go here, and inside my flex box that I have some flexes, I need another item that will be the block class that I created. Now if I add it to flex and save it, we will see a padding over these items. I do the same for this one as well, adding a block class after flex and putting the content inside it, and also for this part, so it looks much better now. The only thing that I want to do is working on this text area. As you already see, this text area has a handle at the bottom right side of it that user can use it to resize it. So to limit this option, we can have another style, and also to change the size we can use HTML, but in this part I want to use a CSS code that both disables this resize option and also sets the size the way we want. So let's get back to CSS and create another selector for text area and set resize to none. And this way that small handle will be removed. And now we need to work on the height of this a little bit. So I set the height to, for example, maybe 300 pixels. And this way we can have our contact form ready as well. And this is the end of the course. During this course you learned everything you needed to know about HTML, and also you got familiar with CSS and JavaScript. In case of HTML, you don't need to take any other course unless you forget something from this course and you need something as reference. In case of JavaScript, you know how to import it and how to use its code in your HTML, and also you have a basic idea about its syntax and the way it works. We also have released some free JavaScript beginner and advanced tutorials on our learning platform, tuts.arashtad.com, and our YouTube channel that can give you a lot of information about JavaScript programming. But about CSS, we have in mind to release a full CSS course, and after that even a full SCSS course, so definitely stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, if I want to give you a high quality source to learn CSS, I can introduce w3schools.com to you. w3schools.com is one of the oldest and most reliable sources to learn programming. As you see, they have a full CSS tutorial on their platform that can teach you whatever you may need to get started with CSS. Also, after taking the course, you can apply for a certificate, and after taking an exam, you'll receive a physical certificate that will be sent to you with post. And also they will publish an online version of your certificate on their website that will be out there forever. This is an example of an online certificate that I've personally received from W3 Schools in 2014, and as you see, it's still there. This way you can share your certificate with others by a constant link that won't change. Also, as I mentioned during the course, this series comes with a package including the project that we completed and a reference including tags, attributes, entities, and so on. You can find the download link in the description of the video, and also the download of course is free. With all that being said, I wish you success in your web development journey and hope you'll like this series. Stay tuned for more programming, server, Linux, and security tutorials, and until the next one, I bid you farewell.